Jim Fox was a dedicated family man, working hard to provide for his wife Helen and their daughter Emily in Pennsylvania. He had been steadily advancing at his company, and their life seemed stable and mutually respectful. Although their marriage had its challenges, Jim believed their bond was strong. However, Helen had grown restless, secretly longing for excitement. Over time, Helen's dissatisfaction deepened, leading her to seek attention outside their marriage. Jim, focused on his career and daughter, remained unaware of Helen's feelings, trusting their relationship completely. The eventual discovery of her betrayal was a crushing blow. One morning, Jim woke up feeling uneasy after a restless night. He had seen Emily's boyfriend with another girl at the mall, and they were kissing. Jim knew telling Emily would hurt her, especially with a crucial volleyball match approaching, so he decided to wait until after the game. Later, Jim was called into a meeting with his boss and introduced to Ralph Jenkins, the previous owner of a newly acquired plant in Daytona Beach. Jim was offered a promotion to oversee the maintenance team there, along with a 25% pay raise and a rent-free apartment for a year. Without hesitation, Jim accepted, thinking his wife would welcome the move to warmer weather. After the meeting, Jim drove Ralph to the airport and began feeling optimistic. Emily could finish her last semester in Daytona and leave her boyfriend behind. But as Jim left the airport, he spotted a red Camry with a visible radiator parked at a nearby motel. It matched the description of Helen's car, which had recently been damaged. His heart raced as he parked nearby, suspecting the worst. Jim, in a company car Helen didn't recognize, decided to wait and see who was with her. Realizing he needed more information, he cut the valve stem on her spare tire, knowing she would call him for help if she had a flat. Then he waited, tense and anxious, to see what would happen next. Half an hour later, Jim heard a curse at his car window, which he lowered slightly. "Damn it, what do I do now?" Helen muttered. "No problem, sexy lady. After a meal like that, I'm happy to help," her companion replied as Jim's world crumbled. "I don't have a spare tire. My husband didn't put the wheel back in the car after fixing it," Helen complained. "What an idiot," her lover chuckled. "I always make sure my wife's car is in top shape. I shouldn't have come with you today. What now?" "Let's go back to our room while I call for help," Helen suggested, and they headed back to the motel. Jim waited for her call, planning how to respond, but his phone never rang. 20 minutes later, Jim's heart sank further as he saw Emily's Honda Civic pull into the parking lot. She walked to the motel, knocked on the door, and after a minute brought a tire from her trunk as Helen and her lover approached. "Frank, pay for this so Emily can play tonight. She needs to stay focused," Helen said. "Thanks, Mom. If you cared, you'd have dressed before I arrived. I need to get to school and prepare. Can you handle it from here?" Emily asked, clearly upset. "No problem, Em," Frank replied. "I'll get dropped off at Home Depot, and I'll be at your game tonight." "Thanks, Frank. Just don't sit too close to Mom. Dad will be there, and I don't want any drama." "Don't worry, I won't cause trouble," Frank laughed. "Your dad won't even notice what's going on." "Frank, don't talk about Jim like that. He's my husband and Emily's father. He deserves respect," Helen interjected. Emily shot back. "Respect? After what you're doing? I just want to finish school and get out of this mess." "I told you I love your father and there won't be a divorce. We'll grow old together," Helen insisted. "You're delusional. Dad won't tolerate this forever, and Frank isn't worth it." "You're just using each other while you can," Emily retorted. "Dad has put just as much effort into this marriage." "Your father? He's not like that. He's a good husband and father," Helen laughed. Emily nodded toward Frank. "Frank's a good guy, huh? Yet he's cheating on his wife with you. If he cared about his family, he wouldn't be here." "Enough, Emily. This isn't up for debate. Get to school and focus. Frank and I will be at your game." "Doesn't make me feel any better," Emily muttered. "Just keep him away from Dad. Frank may underestimate him, but Dad's not a pushover." Emily drove off, leaving Helen and Frank alone as he tightened the tire. "She's not too thrilled about us, is she? My daughter would react the same way. That's why I keep this hidden from her and my wife." "Emily knows what's happening and is keeping quiet to avoid a divorce," Helen reassured him. Jim sat in the back seat of the company car, disoriented long after Helen had driven away. Discovering her affair was painful, but learning that Emily knew and accepted it devastated him. He remembered Emily's volleyball match was about to start, and for the first time in her high school career, he would miss it. Feeling too upset to face his family, he returned home, had a few beers, and contemplated his future. The realization that Helen might not want to move to Daytona because of her lover hit him hard. He reflected bitterly on how faithful he had been, and how she had taken advantage of that trust. Jim realized Helen didn't know about the Florida relocation and would assume he was going to Michigan. He thought about moving to Florida alone, giving himself time to sort out his family issues while she stayed in Pennsylvania with Frank. The idea appealed to him as a small act of revenge. With the weekend and upcoming week to plan, Jim decided to leave for Daytona after Thanksgiving. His wife and daughter would think he was headed to Michigan, giving him space and a break from them. After taking some Dramamine and another beer, Jim prepared to sleep in the guest room. He moved his clothes and toiletries, then locked the door and tried to sleep, though worry kept him awake for a while. Emily noticed her father's truck in the garage and wondered why he hadn't come to her game. Helen, surprised by the empty beer cans, went to check on him but couldn't find him in the usual places. They eventually found Jim asleep in the guest room, unresponsive to their attempts to wake him. He must have been drinking, Emily guessed, puzzled by his behavior and his absence at her game. "We'll ask him in the morning," Helen suggested, noting that he sometimes slept elsewhere to avoid spreading illness. She urged Emily not to be too hard on him. Helen mentioned that Frank thought Emily played well and could get a scholarship, which irritated Emily. "I don't care what Frank thinks," Emily snapped. "He's a cheating idiot, and I'd be happy never to see him again." "Why can't you be happy for me?" Helen complained. "Frank makes me feel young and attractive." "I'm worried about Dad. If he finds out about Frank, it'll break his heart," Emily replied. "That's why he can't find out," Helen said. "I give your father all the love he needs. Frank just gives me something extra." "Keep telling yourself that, Mom," Emily said. "But if you keep this up, Dad will find out, even if it's not from me." "He won't suspect anything if you don't tell him," Helen insisted. "Your father completely trusts me." At 5 a.m., Jim woke up, quietly dressed, and left the house. After finishing breakfast at IHOP, his phone rang. "Jim, are you okay?" Helen asked, worried. "You missed Emily's match last night, and this isn't like you." "I just decided to be unpredictable," Jim replied before hanging up and turning off his phone. Jim spent the morning packing his tools and belongings into his truck, preparing for his move. As the day went on, he became more confident about his decision to start fresh in Florida. He knew he had to keep his plans secret until after Thanksgiving, so Helen and Emily would think he was heading to a colder location. Late in the afternoon, Jim returned home. Helen angrily confronted him for missing Emily's match and acting out of character. 2 days ago, he might have felt guilty, but now her anger meant nothing to him. He simply nodded and left the house, heading to a sports pub for dinner. To his surprise, Jim found he could still enjoy himself. After a few drinks and some sports talk with the other patrons, he returned home around 11 p.m. Helen and Emily were watching a movie. Helen sarcastically remarked on his absence and demanded an apology. "Okay," Jim muttered, grabbing his clothes for the next day and moving to the guest room. As Jim left, Emily noticed, "He doesn't seem to care that you're upset. It's like he enjoys sleeping in the guest room." "You don't know your father," Helen grinned. "He won't last 2 nights before coming back to my bed." "Maybe," Emily replied skeptically, "but I hope he doesn't find out about Frank." "Stop mentioning his name," Helen insisted. "I want to keep this a secret." Emily retorted, "If he's not ready for his wife, maybe you should be the one to raise him." Helen was taken aback by her daughter's bluntness. Emily had agreed to keep Frank a secret to avoid her parents' divorce, but her disrespect was growing. Helen struggled to balance being a good mother and lover, knowing her daughter was aware of her affair. Helen also wondered what had changed in Jim over the past 2 days. He was acting differently, and she wasn't going to tolerate it. But she was confident he'd come around. The sex they had was too good for him to stay away for long. Jim woke early again on Sunday, had breakfast at IHOP, and took a long walk in the park, enjoying the cool November morning. He appreciated the fresh air, knowing he wouldn't have to deal with the cold once he moved to Florida. He returned home before noon with a 6-pack, turned on the TV, and settled in to watch the Eagles game. Helen ignored him for an hour before angrily leaving the house. Helen returned home around 6:30, and by 7 o'clock, the second batch was finished. When Jim noticed there was no dinner, he turned off the TV and left. He ended up at a local sports pub, enjoying ribs and football. The Eagles had beaten the Giants, and Jim was in a good mood, looking forward to Thanksgiving Day when they'd play the Cowboys. "Dad's been acting strange lately, don't you think?" Emily asked her mother. "He usually watches the game on Sundays. Did you two fight?" "We barely spoke," Helen replied. "I told him he needed to apologize for missing your match and drinking too much before he could sleep in my bed again. I also told him I wouldn't cook for him until his attitude changed. He'll miss my cooking and love, and He'll apologize soon. When Jim got home, the football game had become one-sided, so he left the bar early. He walked past Helen and Emily and went straight to the guest room. Helen felt a tension she hadn't expected. Over the next 3 days, Jim stayed silent, showing no intention of apologizing. His defiance unsettled her. On Tuesday, Helen met Frank at the motel and had another flat tire, making her suspect the flats weren't a coincidence. She decided not to return to the motel again. Fortunately, she had the spare tire fixed on Monday, and Frank replaced it. Meanwhile, Jim spent Monday packing his belongings, preparing for his move. He carefully arranged his clothes to make it look like he hadn't packed much, wondering if Helen would notice he didn't take any cold weather gear. On Monday and Tuesday afternoons, Jim waited at Home Depot for his wife to leave work. On Monday, she went grocery shopping afterwards, so Jim parked at his new favorite bar for dinner and Monday night football. "Is Dad coming home today?" Emily asked her mother. "Who knows?" Helen sighed. "He's not talking to me and is still sleeping in the guest room. I don't know what's gotten into him." "Could he have found out what's going on?" Emily asked. "You told him he couldn't sleep with you and wouldn't cook for him, so why would he come home? Maybe you should forgive him and cook him a nice meal." "Tomorrow night I can't. I'm meeting Frank. You'll have to eat leftovers. I'll be home later." "You're prioritizing Frank over Dad," Emily pointed out. "Frank's winning this game." "At least Frank treats me with respect and doesn't get drunk or hang up on me," Helen retorted. "Does he take out the trash, mow the lawn, paint the house, or pay our bills?" Emily asked pointedly. "Of course not," Helen snapped. "Frank just gets into bed with you," Emily responded. "Dad does all the hard work, and you think Frank's the best because he flatters you. You expect so much from Dad, but give what he deserves to Frank. That's not fair." Helen, angered, said, "I'm your mother. Show some respect." "And Dad expects your respect and loyalty, but he's not getting it," Emily argued. "Respect has to be earned, not demanded." That evening, Emily stopped Jim as he walked through the living room. "Our district championship game is tomorrow at 4. Can you make it?" "I'll check my schedule," Jim replied vaguely before heading upstairs. "I think he's mad at me too," Emily said. "I haven't done anything, but he doesn't seem to care. He's in a weird mood." Helen tried to comfort her. "He's upset about something but doesn't know how to express it. He'll come to your game tomorrow. Look, his truck is in the garage." The next evening, when Jim didn't show up at her match, Emily was in tears. "He didn't want to come. Why is he mad at me?" "That's a good question," Helen said sadly. "Let's find out what's going on." Helen returned home around 6:30, and by 7 o'clock, another empty six-pack was on the counter, with no sign of Jim. "It's only 8 o'clock, Helen said, worried. "He can't already be in bed." Once again, they found Jim in a deep sleep in the guest room, unable to wake him. Frustrated, they retreated to the living room. "Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Will you let Dad eat with us?" Emily asked. "Of course," Helen replied. "His parents and mine will be here. This is his home, and I won't keep him away. Hopefully he'll be in a better mood by then. I invited everyone for 4. "Who did you invite, Mom? Please tell me it's not Frank." "Frank and his wife are coming. I think he and Jim will get along. They both like football and hunting," Helen reasoned. "But one of the things they share is you," Emily pointed out. "This is a terrible idea. I just think they'll get along. Jim needs more friends," Helen insisted. "You're out of your mind. This won't end well," Emily argued. "We'll see," Helen replied confidently. Jim woke early on Thanksgiving and went to a small cafe for breakfast. He returned home around 9 a.m., greeted by the smells of turkey and pie. "Dinner's at noon," Helen announced. "Our folks will be here soon. Want something to drink?" Jim shook his head, sat in the living room, and turned on the TV, uninterested in Helen's attempts at peace. He greeted her parents politely when they arrived, as well as his own parents a few minutes later. During dinner, Jim made an announcement. "I'm being transferred to another plant. I leave tomorrow, and it could last until spring or longer." Helen was shocked. Why hadn't he mentioned this before? She knew she wouldn't want to move to Michigan, and this might explain his recent behavior. "This is surprising," Helen's mother commented. Helen didn't mention it. "Will she join you?" "I'll go alone," Jim replied. "It wouldn't be fair to make Emily change schools or for Helen to leave her job. I'll manage on my own for a few months." The grandparents started discussing Michigan's weather, while Helen and Emily exchanged concerned glances, thinking Jim was upset about leaving his family. After dinner, Jim, his father, and Helen's father watched the Eagles game. Disappointed by their team's poor performance, They were half watching the pregame show for the next game when the doorbell rang. Jim didn't pay attention until Helen introduced a couple in the hallway. "This is Nancy and her husband Frank," she said, naming everyone in the room with Jim last. Frank, grinning, walked up to Jim wearing a Dallas Cowboys sweater. "Hello, Jimmy. I've heard a lot about you," Frank said, extending his hand. Jim, who had held everything in, snapped. Without warning, he kicked Frank hard between the legs, then kneed him in the face, knocking him to the floor with a broken nose. Everyone froze in shock. Nancy screamed and rushed to Frank, while Helen vomited in the bathroom and Emily grabbed ice and a washcloth to help. Stunned by his own actions, Jim grabbed his coat and left the house. He drove south on Highway 81, stopping only when he reached Hillsville, Virginia, where he rented a room and quickly fell asleep. The next morning, Jim turned on his phone to find it full of messages, which didn't surprise him. After listening to a few, he deleted them all. Ignoring the calls from his mother, Helen, and Emily demanding to know where he was, Jim decided to stick to his plan and continued driving south on Highway 77. As Jim drove, he kept replaying the previous day's events. Frank had it coming, but what would the consequences be? Would he get arrested, lose his job before reaching Daytona, or face divorce? Realizing he needed to check his messages to understand the situation, he decided to leave his phone on but not answer calls, checking messages after the caller hung up. Helen called within 30 minutes. After waiting a bit, Jim read her text. "Jim, call me. I know the transfer has shaken you, but you need to pull yourself together. Frank's nose needs surgery, but he won't press charges. Please call me." Jim drove all day and arrived at his new apartment at 5 p.m. He retrieved the key from a safe outside, unpacked, parked the truck in the garage, and went to bed by 7 o'clock. With 2 days off before starting his new job, Jim noticed some issues with the apartment and planned to fix them on Saturday. Concerned Helen might find out about the Daytona plant and try to join him, he decided to call her on Saturday morning. "Hello?" "Hi, Helen. It's Jim. Where the hell are you? We called all night, but your phone was off. What's wrong with you? Frank ended up with a broken nose and a concussion just for rooting for a different football team. Are you crazy?" Jim ended the call, turned off his phone, and made a list of items to buy. An hour later, he returned with a new door lock, air filter, cleaning supplies, and a 30-pack of beer. At noon, he called Emily. "Hi, Dad. Glad you called after your fight with Frank. An ambulance took him to the hospital, and everyone was worried you were losing it. Mom was scared they'd sue us. I had to clean up the blood while Mom took Nancy to the hospital. Anything else happen?" "No, pretty quiet," Jim replied. "Just one more thing. Mom's upset you hung up on her again." "Yeah, I could tell," Jim admitted. "I called to let you know I got a new job and start Monday, in case the police ask where I am." "Don't worry," Emily reassured him. "Frank didn't press charges, though I think his wife wanted him to. The cops won't come looking for you." "But why the secrecy about your transfer? Is that why you've been acting weird?" "The transfer made me rethink my life. I realized I need to respect myself to be respected. I've lost my way over the years, but I'm getting back on track." "Are you okay, Dad? Any health issues?" Emily asked, concerned. "Not exactly. You and your mom know what's going on," Jim said sadly. "Just tell her I'm fine and not to worry." "Okay, Dad. I'll call you sometimes. Will you answer?" Jim struggled with his anger toward his daughter. He loved her, but her disregard hurt. He didn't want her out of his life, even though he was still upset about the betrayal. "If you don't call while I'm working, I'll answer," he replied after a pause. "What about Mom? Can she call?" Emily insisted. "Will you answer?" "If she wants to call just to tell me off, she shouldn't bother," Jim responded quickly. "But if there's an issue with the house or family, she should call. That's fair, right?" "I'll tell her. Good luck with your new job and stay warm. Is it cold there now?" "It's better than I expected. Don't worry about the weather. I'll be fine. Goodbye." As soon as Emily put down the phone, Helen started asking questions. "What did he say? Did he apologize? Is he afraid to come home? What did he say about me?" "He doesn't seem scared at all," Emily replied. "He said no one would respect him unless he respected himself. That's why he cut Frank off and keeps hanging up on you. If you want to talk to him, you'll need to show more respect. He's the one who attacked a guest in our home over a t-shirt and keeps hanging up. Next time we talk, I'm telling him exactly what I think," Helen vowed. "That's exactly why he's hanging up. He won't listen to you if you're disrespectful. Frank is the only one benefiting from this unless you find more boyfriends," Emily retorted. "Why do you keep making these rude comments?" Helen asked. "Because you've been rude and disrespectful. Frank laughed at Dad, not just because the Cowboys beat the Eagles, but because he slept with Dad's wife. That's enough to drive anyone crazy, but Dad doesn't know, Frank was hinting. Helen disagreed. He knew Frank was being an idiot, so he put him in his place. You don't disrespect someone in their own home. Any man would be angry, even if he didn't know his wife was cheating, Helen argued. I'm done with this talk. You live under my roof, and you will show me respect. On Wednesday evening, Jim was by the pool when his phone rang. He saw it was Helen and let it go to voicemail. Later, he checked the message. Jim, I know you're screening my calls. Please call me back. We need to make decisions about the house. Who'll shovel the driveway? Should we sign a fuel oil delivery contract? Which company to use? Please call. Hearing no hostility, Jim decided to call Helen back. She had important questions, and he didn't want her or Emily to face any issues. Thanks for calling, Jim, Helen said calmly. I'm worried about the things you usually handle around the house. Now that it's snowing, what should I do? I'll make a list and email it to you, Jim promised. I should have thought of that. Helen then asked, Are you coming home for Christmas? Mom and Dad invited us for dinner, and your parents want to see us on Christmas Eve. It's awkward telling them you're not responding to their calls. I don't know my schedule yet. If possible, I'll come home. You can tell them that. But they need to be polite if they want me to answer their calls. Every message I get, even from my mom, is hostile, and I don't need that, Jim insisted. I'll tell them, but I'm not sure it'll help. They weren't happy about how you treated Frank or that you left afterward, Helen replied cautiously. So there's no point in me coming for Christmas, is there? I'm not showing up just to be treated like the bad guy. If they want me there because they like my company, that's different, Jim said. You can still come home, Helen said, surprising Jim with tears in her voice. Emily and I would love to see you. We'll try not to make any dumb comments. Do you miss making love to me? Jim didn't want to be physically engaged with Helen anymore after hearing her with Frank. But he replied carefully, I've always enjoyed making love. Every time was special to me. He didn't mention that it was because he didn't realize he was getting Frank's leftovers. I agree, Helen cried. You're the best lover in the world, and I miss you. Please come home for Christmas. Let's see if you can join us for the week. I'll check. They don't usually give time off on short notice, especially that week, but I'll let you know, Jim promised. I'll also email you the list of things to handle for winter. Helen smiled after hanging up. Is he really the world's best lover? Emily asked. Frank might not like hearing that. He thinks he's number one. I've told you to be careful when talking about Frank. Your father is actually better than Frank, so that wasn't a lie. Frank is more fun, but not better. When Frank hears that, he'll be pleased. His wife thinks he's better than her other boyfriends. What husband wouldn't be proud of that? Emily noticed her mother leaving the room in tears. Jim enjoyed his new life, swimming daily, getting more tanned, and feeling comfortable. He was confident in his ability to manage the plant's equipment. What surprised him was the number of single women, widows, and divorcees in his condo, all of whom seemed to enjoy his company. Once they learned he could fix things, he was constantly in demand. This didn't bother him, as the women often thanked him with baked goods, meals, or leaving wine or beer at his door. A few days before Christmas, Helen urged Jim to come home for the holidays. After fixing a closet door for Mrs. Struthers, he turned around to find her unclothed. Jim, I don't have much money, but I have needs. Will you make love to me? She asked. Jim hesitated. He had never cheated on his wife and had only ever been with her. Susan was attractive, but he needed to figure out his marriage first. I need to sort out my marriage. After Christmas, I'll know more. I've never cheated, but that might change soon. I'll let you know. I understand, Susan said, covering herself. If you end things with your wife, you'll have plenty of women here ready to console you. Jim called Helen to say he'd try to be home for Christmas Eve. He was surprised by how happy she sounded. Knowing he missed both Helen and Emily, he decided to head north. He planned to drive halfway on the first day, shop on the second, and arrive home before Christmas Eve. When Jim reached his street at 9 a.m., he saw several cars parked in his driveway, recognizing a few. Helen was hosting her usual holiday gathering for her Home Depot friends. As he approached the door, he saw Frank in the kitchen. Anger flared, but Jim didn't want to ruin the holiday mood. He decided to enter through the basement and wait until Frank left. After dozing on an old sofa, Jim woke up 2 hours later. Hearing nothing from upstairs, he peeked outside and saw only one car left. Curious, he went to the front door and saw Helen and Frank in the kitchen. Frank kissed her and touched her bosom, reigniting Jim's anger. He resisted the urge to attack. knowing he couldn't get away with it again. Instead, he planned to sneak upstairs, take pictures, and then leave for Florida. Jim entered the house, climbed the stairs quietly, and hid in the guest room. He turned off the lights and waited. Helen eventually went to the master bedroom, and Jim heard the shower turn on. He guessed she was preparing for Frank. Jim turned off the hallway light and waited in the darkness, knowing Frank would be visible in the dim light from the street. When Frank was almost at the top of the stairs, Jim kicked him in the jaw, sending him tumbling down like a bobsledder. Frank landed at the bottom, motionless. The water was still running, and Helen hadn't heard anything. As Jim's anger faded, he realized that if Frank was dead, he was in serious trouble. Jim hurried down the stairs, stepped over Frank's body, and left the house. 2 hours later, he was already 100 miles away and decided to keep driving before stopping at a cheap motel just before dawn, paying in cash. After a 4-hour rest, he continued south, reflecting on his situation. He had attacked Frank, and depending on whether Frank survived, this could become serious. Jim realized he needed to stay away from both Frank and Helen to avoid ending up in prison. They weren't worth it. Despite everything, Jim admitted to himself that being without Helen made him feel lonely. She and Emily had been his world, but they betrayed him, and he knew he needed to move on. Around noon, his phone rang, but seeing it was his parents' number, he let it go to voicemail. He wasn't ready to explain why he missed Christmas Eve dinner or why he attacked Frank again. Half an hour later, Jim gathered the courage to listen to the message. "Jim, it's your father. Call us when you get this. Something serious happened at your house, but Helen and Emily are fine." Jim called back immediately. "What happened?" he asked when his father answered. "Son, it's Frank. He was at your house again last night. He fell down the stairs and was seriously injured. Broken jaw, arm, ribs, and another concussion. His wife found out he was with Helen and got there before the ambulance did. She was furious, tried to attack Helen, and even tried to throw Frank off the gurney. It was a mess." Jim's father continued. "After Thanksgiving, we thought you overreacted, but now we see why you did what you did. Your mother and I are proud of you. You showed more restraint than I would have." "Thanks, Dad," Jim replied, relieved. "How's Emily? Was she home during all this?" "That's another issue," his father said. "Emily had a serious talk with us this morning. She spent the night at a friend's, but she admitted she knew Helen was cheating. She wanted to keep the family together until she finished school, then planned to tell you. We're disappointed, but we all hugged it out." "Thanks for helping Emily through this," Jim said. "Son, where are you really? I know you said you were transferred, but it seems drastic to move to Michigan in December." "The company transferred me to Daytona Beach. I got a promotion, a big raise, and a small apartment. I'm the maintenance supervisor now," Jim explained. "That's great. Would you mind if your mom and I visit in February? We'll be sick of winter by then." "Anytime, Dad. Just don't tell Helen where I am. I don't want to deal with her now." "Understood, Jim. But you should talk to Emily. She's pretty down about all this. She thinks you knew about the affair because you've been so cold to them. Did you know she knew?" "I need to go, Dad. We'll talk more later. Thanks for your support." "Love you both," Jim said, ending the call. Jim returned to his apartment at dusk on Christmas Eve, feeling depressed about spending his first Christmas alone. He turned on the TV, opened a beer, and sat on the couch to zone out. As he was deep in thought, the doorbell rang. "I saw your light and came to wish you a Merry Christmas," Susan Struthers said. "It's not good to be alone on Christmas. Your return tells me you haven't made peace with your wife." "That's a fair guess," Jim agreed. "Her boyfriend was going to sleep in my bed. I hate crowds unless it's a couple of women." "What about just one woman?" Susan asked, stepping closer. "I might make you move a bit, but I don't think you'll mind." Jim thought about Susan's offer before accepting. "I'd really like that. I should warn you, though. I haven't had sex in a long time, so I might not be very good. Otherwise, my wife wouldn't have looked elsewhere." "I doubt you're the problem," Susan replied. "A man as kind and thoughtful as you is bound to be great in bed. Do you have rubbers?" "No, I haven't used them in 20 years, Jim admitted, realizing he had a lot to learn about dating. "Your partners will appreciate it if you do. It's a smart, responsible choice," Susan assured him. Jim had a memorable Christmas Eve, and his anger toward Helen and Emily started to fade, replaced by happy memories that boosted his self-esteem. Though the pain from their betrayal lingered, he began to move on. Susan helped him see that life was still worth living. Susan left early Christmas morning to avoid gossip, but they agreed to meet at the pool later. That evening, they shared a home-cooked meal and more closeness. Jim returned to his apartment by 9 p.m. aware that others might have noticed his visits to Susan's place. A few minutes after he got home, his phone rang. "Dad, you didn't come home for Christmas. I don't blame you. Mom's a mess, and I feel awful too. I'm sorry for what we did. I knew it was wrong, but wanted you two to stay together until I finished school." "It's in the past," Jim said, "but I won't lie. You both hurt me deeply. I never knew your mom was so unhappy, and I didn't expect you to help her hide it. I'm trying to get through this, but it's tough." "The strange thing is, Mom's not unhappy with you. She says you're a good husband, father, and lover. She just wanted to try something different and regrets it now. Did you know about her and Frank on Thanksgiving?" "Yes, and I should have handled it better, but Frank pushed me too far with his disrespect." "I get it. I saw Frank's grin and knew he was gloating. Mom said it was about the Cowboys shirt, but I knew better. Did you miss my last 2 matches because you were upset with me?" "Yes, I'm sorry, but when Frank said he'd be there, I knew I couldn't go without causing a scene." "Did you hear Frank that day when I brought the spare tire? You cut the valve stem, didn't you? You wanted Mom to call you for help, but instead, I got involved." "I'm really sorry, Dad. I was selfish and stupid, and now I'm paying for it." "Don't blame yourself. I should have confronted your mother right then, but I was too angry. I might have done something I'd regret." "I doubt it, Dad. You're not the type to hurt Mom. But Frank's a different story. Grandpa told me Frank fell down our stairs last night. He's pretty banged up, but will recover. By the way, I found the laptop you left me for Thanksgiving in the basement. Thank you so much. I'll use it a lot, especially for college next year." "I'm glad you liked it," Jim said, realizing he'd forgotten about the gifts he left. "Did you find the one for your mother?" She cried when she saw the pearls. It made her feel even worse about how she treated you. "It's funny. I didn't see the gifts until a few days before Christmas when I was looking for new tree lights. Thank you for being such a good father. I'm starting to appreciate you more." "Don't be upset. When I was your age, I thought my parents were clueless, but they got a lot smarter over the years," Jim chuckled. "I just want you to be happy and live a good life. Don't worry about me." "I love you, Dad. Maybe I'll visit you this winter." "I didn't tell the whole truth about my transfer. The company moved me to Daytona Beach. I've got a small place here, and you're welcome to visit anytime. There's a pool outside, and the ocean's just a couple of blocks away." "Are you kidding? If Mom and I knew that, we would have gone with you. But I get it. We didn't deserve to be with you after all we did. I don't blame you for not telling us. We lied to you, so you had the right to keep something from us. This will really hit Mom hard. You don't have to tell her, but it's not a secret anymore. I'll email her my address so we can sort out the divorce without me having to go back." "I was afraid to ask. Are you divorcing Mom? I get it, and I don't blame you. I warned her about Frank, but she thought you'd never find out. I wish things had turned out differently. Good night, Dad. I'll try to visit." "Great. Good night, and Merry Christmas." Emily had just put her phone away when her mother entered the room. "Did I hear right that your father isn't in Michigan? Where is he, and why did he lie to us?" "He's at his company's new plant in Daytona Beach," Emily replied. "He didn't lie. He said he was being transferred. We just assumed it was Michigan. He didn't tell us because he was there when you called me to bring the spare tire to the motel. He heard everything and knew who you were with. He didn't feel obligated to consider us." "Why didn't he say anything then? Was he afraid of Frank?" Helen asked. "Afraid of Frank? Are you serious?" Emily shot back. Dad wiped the floor with Frank. "Frank's no match for him in a fight or in raising a family. You always try to find faults in Dad to justify your actions. You'd better not treat your next husband the way you treated Dad." "Next husband? What did your father tell you?" Helen asked, alarmed. "He's done with your lies and deception. He's considering divorce, just like I warned you he would. I don't want a divorce. I don't even like Frank. None of this would have happened if he hadn't fallen down the stairs," Helen whined. "Didn't you listen? You were doomed the day I brought you the spare tire at the motel. Dad was there, saw everything, and knew how much we disrespected him. He knows you lied, cheated, and by Thanksgiving, you were already a divorced woman in his eyes. Frank isn't to blame. You are. Maybe now that Frank's wife is divorcing him, you two can be together," Emily suggested. "I don't want Frank. I want Jim back," Helen sobbed. The next day was even worse for Helen. Emily called her father to explain the latest issue. "Mom got a letter from the health department. Frank has an STD, and now Mom has to get tested and inform everyone she's been with. You're on her list, and you'll get a letter soon." "Wow, I should have seen this coming. I'll make an appointment today. Thanks for telling me right away. I appreciate you looking out for me. I was lost for a while, but I'm back on track." Take care, Dad. Jim immediately arranged for a checkup and was relieved that Susan had been careful enough to prevent the spread of anything Helen might have passed on. On his way home, he bought a variety of rubbers and filled a bowl with them, placing it on his bedside table. He vowed never to risk spreading a preventable disease. As time passed, Jim got his test results and was pleased to learn he was healthy. His free time was filled with requests from the women in his condo to help with various tasks. He became more popular, and one evening Susan admitted she had mentioned his skills to a couple of women. Word spread, and Jim found himself regularly refilling his rubber bowl. The women who visited appreciated his concern for their health, which only enhanced his reputation. One afternoon before Easter, Jim was surprised when Emily showed up with a small suitcase. Before he could speak, she hugged him tightly. "I'm so sorry, Dad. Please forgive me and let me stay for a few days. I'll leave if you want." Jim, surprised but happy to see her, said, "You're always welcome here. Come on, I'll show you the room. You look all grown up." "I told you I finally filled out in all the right places," Emily laughed, turning so he could see. "I'm the same bra size as Mom now, though it probably fits me better. Mom's getting pretty thin. I hitched a ride with the Shears. They're headed to Orlando and dropped me off. I knew you'd let me stay. It's spring break, and I'll only be here for 4 days before heading back to the cold. This place is great. I guess you like living here." "It's smaller than our house, but it has everything I need, including a heated pool right outside," Jim said as Emily looked around. "Looks like you're getting everything you need," Emily laughed, spotting the dish of rubbers in his bedroom. "Good for you, Dad. You deserve some happiness after everything. I won't bother you. I'll just relax by the pool while you're at work. I haven't seen the sun in ages." "Tomorrow evening, we'll go out to dinner," Jim said. "There are some great places here. Ribs, steak, seafood, you name it. I'll take you to a spot where the guys from work hang out so they can see how gorgeous my daughter is." The next evening, Jim and Emily sat at the rib joint and had a great time. "Why did you forgive me, Dad? I don't know if I would have if I were you. It was a huge mistake to help Mom with her infidelity. I hate myself for it, and I'm truly sorry." Jim replied, "I'm much happier with you around than without you. In that sense, I'm selfish. It makes me happy, and now it's become one of my life's goals." "I'm glad you feel that way. I hope you're always happy I'm here," Emily said sincerely. "We were always close, and I hated myself when I realized I pushed you away. Do you think you'll ever forgive Mom? She's not doing well without you. She's lost weight and rarely goes out. When rumors spread that Frank had an STD and that his partners needed testing, half the store employees were terrified. Frank seems to have gotten it from a new cashier, infecting a lot of people. Mom was the only manager on the list, which was awkward for her. Your mother and I agreed to be partners, Emily. Partners should be honest with each other. They need to trust each other," Jim admitted. "I don't trust her anymore." "I understand, especially after meeting your harem at the pool today. It was awkward having so many women ask me about you. From the way they talked, I knew at least 4 were sleeping with you." "My dad owns a condo," Emily smirked. "Seriously, they all think you're a sensitive, honest, attractive man who's pretty good in bed. I'm not sure about that. I have a few friends who visit now and then. I don't think they see me as anything special. It's more like I'm just available," Jim said modestly. "Mom made a huge mistake," Emily said. "Can I come here after I finish school and look for a summer job? I'm thinking about going to college nearby. Can I stay with you? Can I spend weekends and holidays with you? It's too far to commute to work, and Mom and I don't get along anymore. We're not close. Her betrayal hurt me more than I realized at the time." Jim eagerly agreed to Emily's request. He felt much happier spending time with his only child. He enjoyed watching her grow into a woman. They spoke several times a week after she returned from spring break. She insisted he not attend her graduation, but he promised to go to Florida the next day. On Sunday afternoon, Jim opened the door to greet Emily. When he saw Helen, he was stunned, unable to think or move for what felt like minutes, though it was only 10 or 15 seconds. He regained some composure. "Come on in, Helen. Can I get you a drink?" Jim asked automatically, trying to figure out why she was at his door. "Thanks, Jim. That would be great," Helen said. Jim followed them into the kitchen, poured them some iced tea, and sat down as Helen took her seat on the other side of the table. "I came to pick up Emily. She told me she's living here with you. I've changed jobs and moved to Dayton. We need to figure out what to do with the house," Helen explained. "You never filed for divorce and we haven't spoken, so I'm not sure what you want to do." "What made you decide to move here?" Jim asked, surprised. "So what do you think will happen?" Helen joked. "I think I'll stop freezing every winter. With Emily in college in Florida, I have nothing to do there but gossip." I'm not sure what Emily told you, but your parents don't talk to me and mine aren't any better. I've let down a lot of people, including myself, but mostly you, Helen admitted. I can't ask for forgiveness because my actions were unforgivable. I'm looking for a fresh start where people won't mock me for having a pop. By the way, I'm glad I didn't pass it on to you. I think you'd stopped having sex with me by the time Frank gave me that gift. I'm responsible for what happened to us. I tried to blame you. Then there was Frank, the girl who infected him, even the man who wrote the letter. Frank went down. I realized it was all on me. I ruined my life and tried to ruin yours. If you hadn't found out, you would have appreciated Frank's little gift for me. I've come to regret what I did. I'm not sure how I thought it was normal at the time, like I was entitled to a fling. I even dragged Emily into this, and I'll never forgive myself for that. I nearly destroyed her relationship with her father because I was a selfish brat. I kept telling myself Frank was an idiot and this would end badly, Helen admitted, but I didn't listen. I'm so glad you welcomed her back into your life. Your love and approval mean the world to her. It meant a lot to me before I lost my way. Now that I don't have it, I'd do anything to get it back. I think we should make a list of things to sell and split the money. I assumed you had already filed for divorce. Isn't Frank single now? Jim asked pointedly. That's what I've heard. But if you mean do I care about that idiot, then no, I don't. I'm a fool, but not so much that I'd get Frank to divorce me, Helen replied. I thought you had already divorced me. I've given you plenty of reasons, Jim said. I'm pretty content with what I'm doing here. You know how much I hate change, and divorce can be pretty disruptive. We should discuss this now, shouldn't we? I guess so. If it's up to me, I'd like to stay married, but my past actions don't really support that, do they? I know you're too good a man to stay with a lying, cheating wife. I knew it all along, but I kept telling myself he'll never know. Where are you staying tonight? Helen asked. We've got time. We can talk about selling the house and everything else in the next week or two. I'm going to find a motel when I leave here. I noticed one near Highway 95. It's pretty close to Home Depot, Helen said, mentioning that she would start working there in a week. Emily went grocery shopping to give us some time to talk, but she'll be back soon, and I need to go. Emily's room has 2 single beds, Jim suggested. You could stay there if she doesn't mind. Won't that make you uncomfortable? I know I'm not her favorite person right now, and I deserve that. I'll be fine. If Emily doesn't mind, we'll ask her when she gets back, Jim replied. Emily didn't mind sharing a room with her mother for a while. Over the next few days, the 3 of them started falling back into the routines they had shared for years. Jim stayed away from the pool and the other women while Helen was living with him. He didn't want to hurt her. A few women came to the pool and asked, "When are you leaving?" Helen began one evening after Emily had gone to a concert. They always talk about your big bowl of rubbers and which ones they like best. It's actually pretty funny when you think about it. They stopped just short of telling me I ruined their Zek's lives. Have you really pleased 4 women, Jim? I'm impressed. Too bad I didn't make an impression on you before I met Frank, Helen added. Jim lost his temper. I'm not going to apologize for making these women happy. None of them are married, and they know I'm not looking for commitments. I try to give them as much pleasure as I can, and they enjoy it. How about some fun with me? Helen asked. No strings attached. I feel like I owe you for taking such good care of me after what I did to you. Jim insisted he wasn't the same guy she remembered. I'm more demanding and assertive now. I tell these women what I want, and they seem to like it. I never let them stay more than one night. So stay with me for one night. I can handle whatever you want to do. It will make me feel better about what I did, and I'll do my best to make you feel even better, Helen promised. Jim thought about her words for a few minutes before making a decision. 10 minutes later, they were unclothed on his bed. My God, Helen gasped, trying to catch her breath. That was amazing. You've learned some new tricks. Thanks, Jim. Helen was moving her clothes from Jim's room to Emily's when she heard Emily's voice. You two are loud enough. I'm glad you're done so I can get some sleep. Helen stayed with Emily and Jim during the summer. She slept on Emily's second bed and visited Jim often. She frequently told Jim he was the only man she'd ever be with. Jim just nodded in agreement. After the first night, Jim noticed Helen often counting the rubbers in the bowl. He realized she was trying to give him everything she had, keeping him from being with the other women in the building. Helen didn't like that her shift ended at 10 p.m. and Jim came home at 5. At least twice a week, she would come home to find fresh sheets on his bed and a couple of rubbers missing, since she had to leave for work at 2 p.m. She spent most of her mornings by the pool. The other women weren't mean to her. It was clear they all knew her marriage was on the brink and that she had caused the damage by cheating. Helen knew that when one of the women made a comment or asked a question, it was a hint. "Helen, did you pick out the new blue bedding for Jim's room?" Susan Struthers asked one morning. "It goes nicely with the curtains and carpet, doesn't it?" "Yes, Monica Barron, it's a lovely masculine color, and Jim is a very masculine man," Helen replied. "Jim, you don't want these women in your bed," Helen complained that night. "I'll give you as much Zex as you want. Aren't I enough for you?" "Exactly," Jim replied. "I won't see any of these women again." "Then why are there 2 rubbers missing from the bowl today? How does everyone know the color of your bedding?" Helen asked. "I honestly have no idea," Jim said with a smile. I've always been drawn to architecture. From sketching buildings in school notebooks to earning a degree, my goal has been to create spaces that inspire. Along the way, I met Sally, who believed in my vision, and together we built a successful architectural firm. My best friend David joined us and became crucial to our success, managing projects and ensuring my designs were executed properly. Everything seemed perfect until one day, while adjusting a project, I caught a news report about a liquidation in Ocala. To my shock, the footage showed Sally and David leaving a motel room together. Sally had left work early, claiming to run errands, while David said he was in Gainesville. The betrayal hit hard. 14 years of marriage and a decade of friendship all called into question. Our firm had grown rapidly, especially after winning a City Hall Design Award. We expanded our team to 12 architects, moved into a new 7-story building, and enjoyed steady profits from rented office space. I had invested the most, followed by Sally and David, and things were going well until that afternoon. The distance between Sally and me had grown over the years due to my long work hours, but I never doubted her love or loyalty. However, the motel footage stirred confusion. I contacted my friend George, who worked at the TV station, and asked for a copy of the broadcast. When I reviewed the footage, it confirmed what I feared. Sally and David had been caught kissing at the motel. I reached out to Tom Noble, the motel's owner, to check the surveillance footage. He said the police had already taken the tapes, but I could view them at any time. I made arrangements to see the recordings immediately, bracing for what they might reveal. I shut down my computer, told my secretary I was leaving early, and asked her to inform security. Once everyone had left, I watched the surveillance video. I saw Dave arrive at the motel first, get the key, and enter room 116. Sally showed up a few minutes later and went in. After a while, a man with a weapon ran past their room, followed by the police. Then it was quiet until the TV crew arrived. The footage showed Sally and Dave kissing before they left the room. I asked the motel clerk if he knew them. "Sure, they come here every week, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson," he said. They had been regulars for 2 years. I took a copy of the video and headed home, forming a plan. I couldn't let them know I was aware of their affair yet. I needed time to figure everything out, especially if they were also stealing from the business. I decided I needed a forensic audit. Fortunately, we were scheduled to attend a Southeastern Architects Association meeting in a week, and I planned to use that time to investigate. With my secretary Marge going on maternity leave, I thought of Debbie, her replacement. She was intelligent, capable, and even proposed setting up a childcare room in the office building, an idea Sally and Dave both liked. I needed to talk to Debbie more and involve her in my plan. Despite everything, I still couldn't believe Sally and Dave were betraying me. Sally was always affectionate, telling me she loved me multiple times a day. Dave also acted deeply in love with his wife, Mary. I had to act convincingly tonight at dinner to avoid suspicion. Dinner went smoothly, though Mary mentioned the liquidation at the Nobility Motel. Sally flinched, but Dave stayed calm, asking if it was the place we had worked on before. I suspected Mary knew about the affair and was subtly provoking them. I had to keep my cool. After dinner, we were all cleaning up. Sally was washing dishes and Dave was drying. Mary and I were bringing in items from the patio. As we entered, Sally and Dave were chatting quietly. Mary joked, "What are you two planning? Sneaking off once John and I are asleep?" They both jumped and Sally laughed, joking that sneaking around was the only way they got any love, adding that Dave was too scared of being caught by Mary. We all laughed, though I couldn't shake my unease. Once Mary and Dave left, I asked Sally if there was something going on. She looked at me with her usual affection, denying anything was wrong. saying she loved me and was ready to start trying for a baby. I couldn't figure out what to believe. She seemed so sincere, but I felt torn. I went upstairs and she was already waiting for me, acting as though nothing had changed. But the guilt and confusion overwhelmed me and I ended up getting sick. Sally tried to comfort me, but I couldn't bear to look at her. I quickly dressed, grabbed my keys, and left the house, not sure where to go. I eventually stopped at a cafe, needing time to think. My phone rang. It was Sally, but I ignored it and ordered a coffee. Lost in my thoughts, I wondered how I hadn't seen the signs of my marriage falling apart. As I sat there, Debbie, my new assistant, saw me and offered to listen. She shared that she had been through difficult times with her own family and understood tough situations. I hesitated, but eventually told her everything. About Sally's affair with Dave and how I couldn't believe it, especially with how often Sally said she loved me. Debbie, still holding my hand, suggested that Sally might have a problem, similar to her sister who loved her husband but couldn't stop cheating. Her sister's situation ended in divorce and illness. Debbie reassured me that people can change, but she emphasized the importance of getting answers. Did Sally love Dave? How long had the affair been going on? Why hadn't it stopped? She recommended I start by getting a detailed summary of Sally's phone calls, which might help me understand more. This young woman was sharp, and I decided to trust her since she already knew most of what was going on. I told her, "I'll pay you to help me gather the information I need." She laughed. "I'll help you, but I don't want your money. Friends don't charge friends." "All right, friend, but call me John outside of work. We'll keep things normal at the office." I asked her to find an investigator and a forensic accountant. I explained that Sally, Dave, and I would be at a meeting in Atlanta for a few days. I gave her a company credit card to cover expenses and explained when and where Sally and Dave met, suggesting hidden cameras might be useful. Debbie smiled. "I may need some cash for a babysitter." "Use the card. You can withdraw up to $300. The limit is $10,000, and I'll give you the PIN." I thanked her, saying, "I won't forget what you're doing for me. I take care of my friends." She smiled softly. "I trust you completely." I felt a weight lift off my chest as I looked at her. She was impressive. I started to think maybe the trouble with my wife was partly my fault. I needed more information to see if it was something we could fix. Debbie then shared more about herself. Her father had been a cop who was tragically eliminated. Afterward, she moved in with her strict uncle. Her sister rebelled and disappeared, returning years later with a husband and baby. Debbie, meanwhile, graduated as valedictorian and quickly worked her way up in a department store, becoming a manager at just 18. But an attack at a work party left her pregnant and unemployed. Despite her challenges, she kept going, raising her daughter on her own. I admired her resilience and told her, "If you ever need anything, just let me know." "What are you studying?" "Business administration, but tuition's tough and my savings are running low." I joked, "Sweetie, I have a proposition for you," and offered to pay for her college in exchange for a contract to work for me during and after her studies. I explained that her pay would increase with her GPA. She was excited, saying, "Wow, I won't disappoint you, John. Just don't call me Mr. outside of work." As she left, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, a tear running down her face. After she left, I noticed her bill was only $2.50, so I paid for both of us. The next morning, I heard Debbie's heels clicking down the hall. She paused at my office door with a bright smile. "Good morning, boss." "Good morning, Debbie. Come on in." She placed 3 $1 bills on my desk and grinned. "I stopped by the cafe this morning to pay for last night, but they said the check was already paid. You must have covered mine." I laughed. "Yeah, I did, but it was only $2.50. "You tipped too, didn't you?" "Yeah, I guess I did." I handed her an envelope. "Here's the credit card. The PIN is inside. Start on those projects we discussed. I'll tell Marge you're working on the daycare plan so you can take your time. Sound good?" She smiled, taking the envelope. "Yes, sir, John. I'll report back later if I'm done before the day's over." By noon, Debbie returned with an envelope. "Here's everything you requested. Let me know if it works for the audit. I need to confirm by tomorrow for this weekend. I'll also need to bring my daughter Dolly with me for the surveillance setup." "Should I come back in an hour?" she asked. I assured her I'd have answers soon and smiled as she left. Then I buzzed Sally. "Hi, honey, what's going on?" Sally answered. "Not much. You didn't go out for lunch?" I asked. "No, too busy. I'm getting payroll ready early since we're leaving for Atlanta on Friday. Is everything set with Dave and Mary?" "Yep. Are you feeling better today? You seemed off last night," I replied. "Yeah, I'm good now." By the way, that girl Debbie dropped off some daycare info. She's sharp, I mentioned. Sally teased. She sure is. Should I be worried about her around you? I laughed. Why? You've never worried before. Besides, she's way too young. If I were 20 years younger, though, maybe. Sally laughed too. She's a cutie, that's for sure. And her daughter is even cuter. That struck a nerve, as I wanted a baby too. Later that afternoon, Dave stopped by. I asked him, "Are you ready for Atlanta?" "Heck yeah," Dave said, then added, "Sally told me you weren't feeling well last night. You all right?" "Yeah, just something I ate," I replied with a grin. As if I could ever cheat on Sally, she'd liquidate me. Dave chuckled, but seemed slightly uncomfortable. "She loves you. She'd never cheat." "Maybe, but under the right conditions, anyone might." "She has plenty of admirers," I said. "True," Dave agreed, "but she's yours." The conference went well, though I was nervous. I called Debbie daily, and she confirmed she had all the info I needed. Sally and I were busy with activities, and though exhausted, we had a good time. After the last day's events, we returned home Sunday evening. While sitting in the back seat with Mary, I noticed Sally repeatedly pushing Dave's hands away while she drove. She glanced back at us, but I pretended to be asleep under my cap. After a moment, I saw her signal to Dave, who turned around to check on us. When I closed my eyes and reopened them, Dave was sitting closer to Sally, and I could hear her softly moaning. I sat up and asked, "Where are we now?" They both jumped. Sally replied, "We just entered Florida. We're looking for a pit stop so Dave can take over driving." At that moment, I knew my marriage was over. The rest of the drive was quiet. After stopping for fast food, we returned home, unloaded the car, and went to bed. Sally snuggled up and quickly fell asleep, but I couldn't. After lying awake for an hour, I called Debbie, who answered right away. "How did things go?" I asked. "Smoothly," she said, "but I suspect tomorrow will be chaotic." I asked her to leave everything in my desk drawer, thanked her, and hung up. Monday started like any other. I left for work before Sally woke up, and Dave arrived shortly after me. I doubted he could stop by to see Sally without being noticeably late. The accounting report was mostly clean, except Dave was misusing his expense account by a couple $100s a month. Nothing major, but it set a bad example. Then I heard Debbie's heels down the hall. She smiled as she poked her head into my office, making the day feel a little brighter. "Hello, boss. How are you today?" she asked. "I'm not sure yet. I haven't read the investigator's report. Did you?" She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I pulled out the report and quickly skimmed through it. My suspicions were confirmed. There was overwhelming evidence. I inserted the DVD and watched the footage. It started with Sally entering the motel room and kissing Dave. They undressed and had sex. I fast-forwarded to the next scene, which was from Thursday. In the video, Sally told Dave, "This is the end. I think we've been too careless. They both suspect something. We can't do this again." Dave agreed, saying it had been a wonderful 5 years. He joked about one last time, but Sally refused, saying she couldn't lose me. They kissed and left. Tears filled my eyes. Debbie shut the door and rushed to my side. "John, are you okay?" she asked. "They're supposed to meet you here in 20 minutes. Do you want me to delay it?" "No," I said. "Give me a minute to wash my face. When is Mrs. Forrester expected? 5 or 10 minutes after Sally and Dave arrive? Can you stall until then? Buzz me when she gets here and escort her in. Stay as a witness. You control the hidden cameras, right?" "Yes, I'll turn them on when they arrive." "Good. The faster Mrs. Forrester comes in, the better." Debbie smiled. "You'll do just fine, Mr. Nelson. I guess you noticed the tissues I put around the room." She glanced at the clock. "I need to get back to my desk." She peeked outside, then blew me a kiss. "Be strong, boss." The door closed behind Debbie. 2 minutes later, the buzzer rang and Dave and Sally entered. I pretended to be on a call, motioning for them to sit. I said, "Right, George, I'll let you know how it goes. Bye." Then the buzzer went off again. Debbie announced, "Mrs. Forrester is here." I welcomed Mary in and said, "Mary, I thought you should be here since this affects you too." Sally and Dave exchanged nervous glances. I introduced Debbie as my temporary secretary and asked everyone to watch the TV monitor. I played the video of Sally meeting Dave at the motel. Sally screamed, "No!" and collapsed onto the floor. Dave glared at me, saying, "You son of a—" Mary interrupted, "No, you're the son of a witch, David. Be quiet. I want to hear this." After more footage, I stopped the video and turned to Mary. "You need to see one more part." I showed the clip where Sally and Dave agreed to stop the affair, fearing they'd been caught. Sally was still crying on the floor. I said firmly, "Enough, Sally. It's too late. You need to hear this. It's about your future." I turned off the DVD and said, Sally, I will always love you, but I can never trust or live with you again. You'll be served with divorce papers as you leave. I looked at Mary. I'm sorry to drop this on you, but I think you had an idea this was happening, didn't you? Mary nodded. Yes, I did. I smelled Sally's perfume on Dave and knew something was off. I forgive you, John. I've already lined up a lawyer for this. I turned to Sally and Dave. Cheating is like stealing. Our wedding vows mean forsaking all others, and you both broke that trust. In business, trust is everything. I propose buying you both out, but I'll need time to gather the cash. If not, we sell the business and split the profits. We'll decide in 10 days. Any comments? Mary spoke first. The money Dave invested is mine. I'd like to stay as a silent partner. Dave's fired and has no home now. I smiled. That makes things easier. I'll get the paperwork drawn up. Sally then asked, John, can I keep my share and be a silent partner too? Just send me the dividends. Mary, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this. I was weak and threw away the best man in the world. My life is over. I sighed. Sally, you can keep the house. I'll move out soon. Sally left, and I heard her being served divorce papers. As her heels clicked down the hall, I turned to the window, tears in my eyes. After a few minutes, Debbie gently pulled on my arm and dabbed at my eyes with a tissue. Mr. John, are you all right? I smiled. It's hard to end 14 years of what I thought was a perfect marriage, but I'm relieved I can keep the business. Debbie smiled. I'm happy for both of us. Now you can keep your promise. I would have kept it somehow. How's the daycare project coming along? Debbie smiled, and the tension I'd been feeling vanished. I've finalized all the figures, and even found a retired nurse who'd love to run the daycare. She knows other RNs who would be interested in working part-time or full-time. I'd like to bring her in. I replied, That's your call. If she's a good fit, send her to Joanne in HR. Do you still have money left on the credit card? Yes, more than half. Good. Use it to buy the equipment she needs. If the room requires modifications, arrange a meeting with all department heads, including Sally and Dave's assistants, right after noon in the conference room. I smiled and said, I'm putting a lot on your plate. Can you handle it? Yes, I can. I'll only ask for help if necessary. Great. From now on, set up a daily morning meeting with me. Also, you're now my personal assistant. Find a secretary for yourself and give yourself a raise. She beamed, hugged me, and kissed my lips before pulling back, embarrassed. I'm so sorry. I got excited. I laughed. Thank you for the kiss. I might have to promote you daily. She blushed and said seriously, I hope it's for more than just my kisses. Don't worry. I trust you'll do a great job. You'll be my eyes and ears to help run the business. Promoting Debbie was the best decision I'd made. She handled everything with efficiency, leaving me free to focus on what mattered. The daycare was set up in no time. A couple of weeks later, she walked into my office for our morning meeting, looking professional in a new business suit. Good morning, boss, Debbie said cheerfully as she walked into my office. Good morning, Deb. How are you? I asked. Grinning, she replied, Much better now that I'm here. Thank you. Now meet my new assistant, Debbie said, pressing the intercom button. A tiny girl came bouncing into the room. Here I am, Mommy, the girl exclaimed with excitement. Debbie smiled and introduced her. This is my daughter, Dolly. Say good morning like I taught you. Dolly curtsied sweetly and said, Good morning, Mr. John. I'm pleased to meet you. Grinning, I replied, Good morning, Miss Dolly. Are you enjoying the daycare? Oh, yes, it's fun, and Mommy visits me lots, she said with a bright smile. I couldn't help but ask, Dolly, have you ever been to the zoo? Dolly looked up at Debbie, then back at me. No, where the animals are good? She asked innocently. I smiled at Debbie and turned to Dolly. Well, I'd love to take you and your mommy to the zoo this Sunday if you'd like. Dolly's eyes lit up, and she excitedly asked her mom, Mommy, can we go? Realizing I'd spoken out of turn, I quickly apologized. I'm sorry, Deb. I should have asked you first. Please forgive me. Debbie smiled warmly. It's okay. You just got caught up in the moment. Yes, we'd love to go. I'll pack a picnic. Debbie, do you have a car? I asked, noticing the slight hesitation in her response. No, mine broke down, and I'm saving up for one, she explained. As my personal assistant, you need a company car. I'll arrange everything this afternoon after lunch with you and Dolly, I offered. Sunday at the zoo was wonderful. Dolly was thrilled, and I ended up carrying her for most of the day. Spending time with a child was more special than I had imagined, and I enjoyed Debbie's company too. The next day, I arranged for a company car, a 2-year-old Honda Odyssey. I instructed our transportation chief to clean it up and park it in Dave's old spot, now reserved for Debbie. That afternoon, Debbie stopped by my office with Dolly, letting me know they were heading home. I playfully stuck out my lip in a pretend pout. Dolly's eyes widened as she tugged at her mom. "Mr. John is crying, Ma." Debbie and Dolly both asked, "What's wrong?" I smiled and replied, "Dolly didn't kiss me goodbye." Dolly giggled and ran over, arms outstretched. I lifted her, laughing, and after she gave me a sweet kiss, I set her down. Then I handed Debbie a set of car keys. She looked at them, puzzled. "You look so professional in your new suit, and you can't be seen riding the bus. These are the keys to your company car, parked in your new reserved spot," I said. Debbie's eyes widened in surprise. "What? Really?" "Yup. If you don't have a child seat for Dolly, get one. Now, go on," I added with a grin. Debbie hesitated for a moment, then shook her head, scooped up Dolly, and left. The next morning, I saw her pull into the lot in the Honda minivan. When she noticed the coffee on her desk, she smiled, walked into my office, and quietly closed the door behind her. Without a word, she hugged me tightly and kissed me deeply before pulling back and asking, "Why are you so good to me?" I smiled at her. "Because you've earned it. The company runs smoother than ever, and honestly, being around you makes me happy." She looked up at me, searching my face. "Is that really true?" "Of course. You know I don't lie," I reassured her. "John," she started hesitantly, "I need your help. I bought steaks and a grill, but I have no idea how to cook them. Can you show me tonight?" "Sure, I'd love to," I agreed. She hesitated again, then added, "And Dolly's been begging to have you over for dinner. She really likes you. And, well, so do I." She blushed slightly. I smiled warmly. "About the minivan, though, I can't accept it." Her brow furrowed. "You don't like it?" "We love it, but it's too much," I explained. "It's been sitting unused for a year. If you really don't want it, I'll get you something else," I offered. She laughed, shaking her head. Okay, I'll keep it. You sure know how to get your way." I chuckled. "Hey, you're the one who convinced me to set up a daycare. You're good at getting things done." "Just don't be mad at me," she said softly. "I'm not mad. That's why I hired you, to push me to do what's needed. You keep everything running smoothly." She giggled, clearly relieved. "It works, doesn't it?" I grinned. "What time should I come over for dinner?" "How about right after you change? Oh, and the grill is still in the van," she reminded me. "I'll be there soon," I promised. Dinner that night was perfect. Steaks, baked potatoes, and corn on the cob, all cooked on the grill. Afterwards, Dolly and I played Go Fish, and later we treated ourselves to ice cream at Dairy Queen. It was a fun, messy evening, and after helping put Dolly to bed, Debbie and I shared a quiet glass of wine. I knew it was time to leave. "Can I see you tomorrow?" I asked, sensing something in the air. Debbie hesitated again, then said, "John, we need to talk." A chill ran down my spine. "I'm listening," I replied, worried I'd overstepped. "You always listen, but you're not hearing me," she said gently. "I think I need to release you from your promise and find another job." My heart sank. "Why? I thought you loved your job." "I do," she admitted, "but I feel like I owe you so much and I don't know how to repay you." I shook my head. "You don't owe me anything, Deb. I've gained far more from you than you've given." She looked at me, clearly confused. "How is that possible? I haven't given you anything." "You've given me the most precious gift of all, time with you and Dolly. Your kindness has saved me. If I weren't so much older, I'd court you with everything I've got." I paused, realizing the weight of what I'd just said. I probably shouldn't have said that. Her eyes softened as she looked at me intently. "Are you telling me you love me but won't pursue me because of your age?" "Yes," I whispered. "I love you with all my heart." As I poured my heart out, Debbie's face lit up with a big smile. She jumped into my lap and kissed me passionately, then showered my face with kisses. "John, I love you too. Dolly loves you so much. I want you tonight, and I want to wake up with you in my bed. You'll have to teach me about Zex." I smiled as she kissed me again. "I don't know much about Zex," she admitted, "but you're the Zexiest man I've ever met. I fell in love with you the day I started working for you." She caressed my face, speaking softly. "I meet lots of guys at school, but they're so immature. You're different. And I love that about you." I kissed her gently, then carried her to bed where we cuddled. "John, I love this peaceful feeling after being close to you," she said, giggling. I hope you can dance as well as you love. Dance? Yes, I love dancing. I used to teach at Arthur Murray. I always dreamed of marrying a tall, strong, handsome man who'd dance with me into the sunset. Well, 3 out of 4 isn't bad, I joked. She smiled. Honestly, I'll skip the dancing for your love. I can't live without that. As I thought about what we needed to arrange, marriage license, honeymoon, where we'd live, Debbie grinned knowingly. You're thinking about a solution, aren't you? I can help. I told her my thoughts and she smiled. Don't worry, I have it all planned. Go back to sleep. I tried to relax, but my mind was racing. She snuggled up to me and, with a soft smile, whispered, I love you so much. We can solve any problem together. I never want to sleep without you again. Do you have room for Dolly and me at your place? Yes, I live in a 3-bedroom condo. We can move you in today. She kissed my cheek and said, Problem solved. Now, I need to brush my teeth for a real kiss. When she returned, wrapped in a towel, she grabbed a small notebook and slid back into bed. She flipped through it and showed me a page titled Marriage Information, which listed everything we needed to know. Addresses, phone numbers, and even things like banking and insurance. How long have you been planning this? I asked. Since I first met you, she giggled. I couldn't sleep last night, so I got up and made the list. Give in to your urges, I teased. I love it. Everything went smoothly. We got married in my office that Monday with Debbie, Dolly, a notary, and a few witnesses. Dolly was thrilled, wanting me to hold her constantly, and Debbie held my other arm. I couldn't have been happier. Debbie also trained a young man, Jeff, to take over her day-to-day tasks. He was athletic and about 30, which made me a bit uneasy, but I said nothing. The next morning, I noticed Debbie spending a lot of time with Jeff. I visited Joanne in the secretarial pool and asked for a new assistant. She smiled knowingly and said, I've got just the right person. She'll be in your office tomorrow, ready to help. That afternoon, I went to check on some new wall section drawings for a building I was designing. When I returned to my office near closing time, I found Debbie showing Jeff how the intercom system worked. Carrying Dolly, I said, Hi, Debbie. Dolly and I are ready to go. We'll be waiting in the atrium. Debbie quickly grabbed her jacket, looking adorable in her outfit. She had lost weight and was looking great. I decided she needed a shopping spree. As we headed out, she asked where we were going, but I told her she'd find out soon. When we arrived at a high-end department store, her eyes widened. We got Dolly settled in her stroller, and a shopper's assistant named Jane greeted us. I explained that my wife needed a new wardrobe, including business attire, casual clothes, and lingerie, and handed Jane a budget of $5,000. Debbie protested, Don't I get a say in this? I smiled. You pick what you like, and I'll tell you if I like it. But you're getting a new wardrobe. Tomorrow's Dolly's turn. The assistant grinned and led Debbie away. After 2 hours, I was dozing off with Dolly asleep in my arms when Debbie kissed me awake. We're done for now, and we'll return tomorrow. I got so much for under $2,500. Back home, we unloaded 4 loads of boxes into Debbie's dressing room, and I helped unpack. We ordered Chinese for dinner, and Dolly loved the fortune cookies. When she handed me one, I read, Your daddy will take you shopping for dresses tomorrow. Dolly's eyes lit up. Is that for me? She asked excitedly. The next day, both Debbie and Dolly got lots of new clothes. That evening, Debbie showed me her favorite shopping site, and I let her spend an additional $1,000 on summer outfits. She looked amazing in everything she modeled, and her happiness made it all worth it. After Dolly went to bed, I pulled Debbie into my lap, and we kissed. I suggested, maybe it's time to call your mom and tell her about us. Debbie thought for a moment and then agreed. She called her mom, reconnecting after 3 years, and shared the news about Dolly and our marriage. They spoke for over an hour. After the call, Debbie, with fresh tears in her eyes, jumped into my lap and kissed me passionately. Thank you, John. That was the right thing to do. Mom and Uncle Bill were so happy. They want us to visit soon. Where do they live? I asked. Melrose, Florida, less than an hour away. I smiled. How about we visit on Sunday? She agreed, and after putting Dolly to bed, I went to kiss her goodnight. As I approached Dolly's door, I overheard Debbie softly praying with her, asking God to bless their loved ones and keep them safe. Dolly added, And Daddy too. Debbie smiled. Yes, sweetie, Daddy most of all. We love him the most. I entered and hugged both of them. Dolly reached for me and I picked her up, hugging and kissing her. I love you, Daddy, she whispered. I love you too, sweetie. Sleep well. Tears filled my eyes as she said, I love Mommy and Daddy as much as I can. She was so sweet, and I loved my girls deeply. The next morning, while I made breakfast, Debbie called her mom. She smiled as she told me, "We're all set for Sunday." On Saturday, our shopping trip was focused on finding outfits for the visit. Both Debbie and Dolly picked matching denim skirts, black turtlenecks, and denim jackets. Dolly wore tights and boots, while Debbie opted for leggings and heeled boots. They both looked adorable. I wore jeans, a blue shirt, and a navy blazer. Debbie guided me to her family's large home. As we pulled up, her mother and Uncle William greeted us warmly. While Debbie and her mom embraced, I introduced myself to Uncle William and introduced Dolly, who curtsied sweetly. Uncle William, with tears in his eyes, picked Dolly up to introduce her to her grandmother. But when her grandmother reached out, Dolly clung to me, scared. I quietly reassured her, explaining that her mom's tears when talking about her mother were from missing her, not fear. Slowly, Dolly felt reassured and allowed her grandmother to hug her, breaking the tension. We moved inside, and Dolly quickly warmed up to her grandmother. Debbie smiled at me, love in her eyes. Uncle William and I started talking, and he recognized me from a past business meeting. We ended up chatting about work, and he admitted his regret over pushing Debbie to have an abortion, calling it his biggest mistake. I laughed and told him, "Debbie is a determined, intelligent woman. She's turned my business around in just a few months. Production and profits are up, and everyone loves working with her." As the afternoon progressed, Granny asked if Dolly could stay with her for a few days, but Debbie and I agreed she was still too young. Truthfully, I wasn't ready to let her go just yet. Dolly spent half her time in daycare and the other half with us, becoming a beloved presence at the office. Debbie was an active manager, visiting every office daily, always asking questions and expecting solutions. Her smile lit up the office, and her praise was cherished by everyone, but a frown from her was deeply felt. One day, Debbie noticed the new secretary at her old desk and entered my office, frowning. She asked, "How's the new girl working out?" "She's fine," I joked, "but she doesn't kiss as well as you." Debbie teared up, and I quickly reassured her, "I'm just teasing. You and Dolly have all my kisses forever." Her smile returned, and she playfully asked, "What about hugs?" "Those too," I laughed. "That might change," she teased, hinting at future babies. Later, I saw Jeff checking out Debbie while she worked, and it bothered me. Later that day, I overheard Jeff in the restroom bragging to a coworker about his intentions to pursue Debbie. Furious, I called Debbie into my office and asked her to fire Jeff. She was surprised, but didn't argue. A few hours later, Debbie confirmed she had fired him, and we headed home together. On the way home, Debbie asked, "Aren't you going to ask if I fired Jeff?" I smiled. "Why wouldn't you?" She explained that one of the workers told her Jeff was spreading rumors about them. "Good call," I said, suggesting we promote the worker who gave her the tip. That night, as we prepared for dinner, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jeff pointing a weapon at me. He demanded to see his daughter, claiming Dolly was his. Debbie calmly corrected him, saying he was mistaken, and explained that Dolly wasn't his child. Jeff, confused, realized he had mixed Debbie up with someone else. As Jeff's attention shifted entirely to Debbie, I saw my chance. I quickly punched him in the head, and he dropped, the weapon hitting the floor. I grabbed the revolver just as Debbie rushed over and kicked him hard in the groin, screaming at him. She kicked him in the head and face, yelling until a deputy arrived and pulled her back. Soon, several deputies were in the apartment. Jeff was handcuffed, and we learned that the pizza delivery guy had seen Jeff with the weapon and called the police. After checking on Dolly, who was sound asleep, we gave statements. Jeff was charged with attack and several other crimes. Afterward, we sat down to eat but barely touched our food, mostly holding each other. Debbie, still in shock, said, "I don't even remember seeing him before he worked for us." I suggested she might have blocked the memory to avoid reliving the trauma of her attack. She nodded, unsure if she had ever seen his face clearly. Then she noticed my swollen hand. "We need to get ice on that," she said, bringing a bowl to help. She complimented me on how I handled Jeff, distracting him. I joked about how her ballet slippers were a better choice than stilettos. Otherwise, she might have done real damage. Debbie got serious, saying, "No one threatens my family and walks away unscathed." That night, I suggested we both get concealed weapon permits and look into self-defense training. Debbie knew of a place near Melrose for martial arts training and said she would set it up. The next morning, after a restless night with my hand bandaged, Debbie mentioned she had already signed us up for a weapon safety course at a local shop. She surprised me by sharing how much experience she had with firearms, thanks to her Uncle Bill, who had taught her to shoot various weapons. Later, I showed Debbie my hidden weapon locker, letting her pick one for the class. She chose a small .22 revolver, smiling and saying she used to shoot one like it. She also picked up a Walther PPK in .380, saying it reminded her of her uncle's weapon. Debbie shared an old lesson from her father. It doesn't matter the caliber if you strike the target in the right place. A miss with a bigger weapon is still a miss. I agreed, saying accuracy is key, no matter the weapon. We left work early, dropped Dolly off at Grandma's, and headed to the martial arts center. After discussing our experience and concerns about having a toddler, the owner recommended a self-defense baton disguised as a flashlight. A quick wrist flick extended it to 21 inches. He offered a 1-hour class, which we signed up for, and we bought 2 batons. Next, we went to the weapon shop for our concealed weapons course. Deb practiced with both weapons and preferred the Walther PPK, becoming skilled at hitting the target consistently. She bought a clip-on holster and a few stylish purses designed to hold the PPK. I chose my Smith & Wesson .40 caliber, purchasing a fanny pack holster. We picked up our study materials and left. At Grandma's, Uncle Bill showed me a homemade self-defense tool, a piece of rebar with nuts attached, and explained how it could be used for protection while looking harmless. I complimented his ingenuity. After the incident with Jeff, I upgraded our home security with hidden cameras and took Debbie to the shooting range several times. I taught her to shoot through a purse, simulating a real-life scenario where she couldn't pull the weapon out first. After some practice, she mastered it, even hitting targets from different positions and distances. Debbie became proficient at point shooting and impressed everyone at the range. She could rapid-fire 6 shots, all hitting the target. She was concerned about ruining her purse, but made adjustments to use it for training. I joked that if she were in an evening gown with a tiny clutch, she'd need my protection. She replied, "I always look to you for protection. You're my hero." The weapon shop owner watched Debbie's progress and remarked on her impressive skills. We both passed our written test and received our concealed carry permits. We kept practicing at the range, with Debbie becoming extremely accurate at close range, consistently scoring well. Debbie loved stopping by the range to practice, and her shooting skills and grace on the line attracted attention. She quickly became a standout, impressing everyone, including the range master. One day, she took on a challenge to shoot at 2 targets on either side, hitting them flawlessly within 4 seconds. The range master praised her, noting that she learned well to keep her weapon functional during critical moments. After a few more rounds, we left, but it was clear Debbie had become an impressive shooter, admired by all. We also bought her several holster purses, including a small clutch that could eject the pistol directly into her hand when needed. Debbie often dressed in a way that turned heads, with high heels, short skirts, and sexy tops, and she knew I didn't mind others admiring her. It was fun for both of us. One afternoon, she came into my office, closed the door, and climbed into my lap. She kissed me and said, "I've stopped taking the pill, and I want us to take a week-long vacation. Mama and Uncle Bill can watch Dolly. She's comfortable with them now." I smiled and told her to plan it. Debbie excitedly shared, "We're going to Grand Cayman, staying at a clothing-optional resort." I laughed and asked about the cost. She reassured me it wasn't much and that she was mostly packed. Our vacation was great, though our experience in the clothing-optional section didn't go as planned. After relaxing on the beach, we woke up to a small crowd watching us. A man approached, offering Debbie a role in an adult film, boasting it would make her big money. I stood up and told him, "She's a CEO making $9,000 a week. You'd have to beat that." The man was stunned. Later, back in our room, Debbie teased me, asking if she could star in the movie. I played along but made it clear I wouldn't allow it. We laughed about it, but she admitted she couldn't do that anyway. "I'd never let another man touch me," she said seriously. We kept the conversation light, teasing each other about the bizarre encounter. However, after some playful back and forth, Debbie joked about my size compared to the guy on the beach, which stung a bit more than I expected. Needing space, I left the room and wandered the resort, lost in thought. Eventually, I overheard Debbie talking to the man from the beach. He warned her that teasing a man about his size could have lasting damage. I listened, pained, as he explained how such remarks could ruin a relationship. Debbie cut him off, clearly worried, and hurried to find me. When she saw me sitting nearby, she ran into my arms, tears forming. We went back to our room, but I was still upset. As I undressed, she asked with concern if my frustration was because of her teasing. I sighed, admitting that her comment had hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Debbie's face crumpled with tears, trying to explain through her sobs. I gently calmed her down and told her I overheard the conversation with the corn guy. Her eyes were still wet as she asked again if I was okay. "I'll do my best with my inferior equipment," I joked, blending humor with vulnerability. Debbie hugged me tightly, and after that, the misunderstanding between us seemed to lift. We never saw the guy again. The rest of our honeymoon was relaxing, and we made love often. Leaving Grand Cayman was bittersweet, but we were excited to return to Dolly, whom we called every day. When we got home, Dolly ran to us, screaming, "Mommy, Daddy, I missed you!" She jumped into Debbie's arms while I watched, moved by their reunion. As I gathered our gifts, Dolly shouted, "Where's Daddy?" I scooped her up and we all hugged together, crying tears of joy. Debbie's mom and Uncle Bill told us Dolly had been wonderful while we were away, and that she was always welcome to stay with them. Dolly clung to us, saying, "Don't leave me again for a long time," and we promised we wouldn't. Back at work on Monday, Deb and her team had narrowed down candidates for a new engineer position. They hired 2 top contenders, Betty Johnson, a sharp young assistant professor, and Jamal Washington, a well-qualified and personable engineer. A couple of months after our honeymoon, Deb sat me and Dolly down at the kitchen table. She held our hands and smiled, telling us she had news from the doctor. I immediately feared the worst, but Deb reassured me with a laugh. "We're going to have a new family member soon," she said. Dolly excitedly guessed we were getting a puppy, but Debbie smiled and told her she was going to have a little brother or sister. Overjoyed, I scooped Dolly into my arms, spinning her around the kitchen as we both cheered, "Mama's going to have a baby." Debbie watched, laughing through happy tears. We gathered around her, hugging and kissing, overwhelmed with love and joy. As I looked out the window, trying to collect myself, the weight of becoming a father again hit me. I turned back, hugged Debbie, and whispered, "Thank you for this precious gift." Debbie, eyes shining, whispered back, "This will be our child, a melding of the 2 of us." Dolly, ever curious, asked if we could get a puppy next time. Debbie laughed, explaining she was 2 months along and that it would be a while before she started to show. She then asked if I would attend birthing classes with her. "Of course," I said. "I'll go anywhere with you, my love." She rested her head on my chest, and we talked about the months ahead. 7 more months of waiting, and then we would welcome a new addition to our family. As I looked at the little girl in front of us, my mind raced with worry. How would Debbie's small frame handle carrying our baby? I was bigger than Jeff, Dolly's biological father. What if the baby was too big, or if she had twins? I hadn't thought about this before, and now I feared for her safety. Debbie noticed my concern. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked gently. I pulled her close and whispered my fears. She reassured me that women's bodies are built to handle larger babies and modern medicine would address any complications. "That's why I go for prenatal care," she said. "The doctor monitors everything. If necessary, they can induce labor or perform a C-section." I still wasn't completely convinced. "Not for you," I muttered, worried. Sensing the tension, Dolly asked, "What's wrong, Mommy? Why is Daddy crying?" Debbie smiled, brushing Dolly's hair. "Daddy's just being silly. He doesn't know how babies come out of Mommy's tummy. He's afraid it will hurt me." Dolly, with childlike innocence, said, "That's silly, Daddy. Mommy said it hurts a little, but mommies love their babies, so they don't mind." Debbie grinned at me and we all hugged. Months passed and Debbie's belly began to show. She was glowing, happier than ever, and said this pregnancy was better than her first, because this time she wasn't alone. She had a loving husband, and everyone around her was supportive. One afternoon, Debbie, 7 months along, went to the bank while Dolly and I waited in the car. Suddenly, I heard fire shots. I grabbed my pistol and saw Debbie on the curb, exchanging fire with 3 men. 2 were down, and the car lurched toward her. I fired at the driver, and the car crashed into a tree. Panicking, I rushed to Debbie, relieved to find her unhurt. We barely had time to catch our breath before more shots rang out from inside the bank. I started toward the bank, but Debbie grabbed my arm. "I'm coming with you," she insisted. Together, we approached the shattered glass doors. Inside, a man held a woman hostage. I took a shot, knocking him in the head, and he dropped. As I moved to check on the woman, another robber rose behind a desk. Debbie fired 2 quick shots, taking him down. After the police arrived, we handed over our weapons and were praised for saving lives. Debbie, calm but shaken, joked about ruining her pantyhose and purse. We headed home, exhausted and overwhelmed by the day's events. Later, we saw ourselves on the news as the heroic husband and wife team who stopped the robbery. The reality of the situation hit us hard, and we both cried, realizing how close we had come to losing each other. The sheriff visited us the next morning to review security footage that captured everything. Watching it unfold again was surreal. Debbie had been calm and precise, taking down 2 of the robbers without missing a shot. The sheriff was amazed and praised her skills, saying, "Not many deputies could have done what you did." He invited us to a press conference, and though we were exhausted, we agreed. Debbie blushed at the attention, but humbly said, "I was just doing what I had to do." The sheriff smiled. "Well, you did it perfectly. You two make quite the team." The following months were a whirlwind of media attention. Debbie was flooded with offers for interviews, talk shows, and product endorsements, from hair products to diapers. I had to step in to ensure she wasn't overwhelmed, limiting her activities, especially as her due date approached. I restricted any plans for the week before and 3 weeks after the baby was born, even limiting her communication to just family and close friends. Despite my efforts, Debbie insisted on working right up until she went into labor. She continued managing her work, though I had her hold meetings in her office instead of walking around. Jamal Washington was always her first appointment in the mornings, which started to irritate me. One day, she mentioned visiting a few offices and asked if I'd watch Johnny. I suggested she keep having her meetings in her office, but she looked confused. "I like to visit each office and see how things are going firsthand," she said. "Who do you see first?" I asked casually. "Jamal, of course," she replied. "Why doesn't he report to Marty or Betty?" I asked. She paused, thinking. "I'm not sure. That's just how it's been." "I don't like it," I said. "He should be reporting to his boss, not you." Debbie considered my words, then smiled. "I'll take care of it," she said. I was relieved. "Good. Keeps things in the proper chain of command, and no one will think he's getting special treatment." Debbie raised an eyebrow. "Including you?" "Yep," I said, smiling. Debbie playfully flipped me off and laughed. "Oh, stop it." Months later, we held our company's annual beach party at my property near Daytona. It was an adults-only event, so Dolly and Johnny stayed with Grandma. The party was a hit, but I noticed Jamal was always around Debbie, and it started bothering me. It seemed like she was avoiding me, and my frustration grew. Betty, who was helping with the food, noticed my mood. "What's wrong?" she asked. I sighed. "I need a walk to clear my head," I muttered. I wandered along the beach, my mind racing with doubts. Could Debbie be interested in Jamal? I couldn't bear the thought of losing her. After some time, I sat on a log, lost in thought, when I heard voices and saw Debbie approaching with Betty. "Are you just going to sit there until the water reaches you?" Debbie asked. "I don't know," I muttered, still staring at the ocean. Debbie knelt beside me. "Betty told me you were upset about Jamal and me. John, I love only you. There's nothing between Jamal and me, and there never will be. You're stuck with me forever." I looked at her, confused and hurt. "But you spend so much time with him. What am I supposed to think?" Debbie sighed. "I've been helping him through a rough time. He's in love with someone, and it's tearing him up because they don't love him back." "Who is he in love with?" I asked. Debbie hesitated, then said softly, "You." I froze. "Me?" I asked, stunned. Debbie nodded. "Yes, John. He's admired you since he started working for us. He's not interested in me. He's been spending time with me to be near you." I was shocked. It all started to make sense, the way Jamal acted around me, but I had misread it completely. "I feel like a fool," I admitted. Debbie squeezed my hand. "Don't. It's normal to feel the way you did, but now you know the truth." "So what do we do now?" I asked. Debbie thought for a moment. "We'll talk to Jamal. He's done a great job, but he'll need to report to Marty or Betty from now on. It will keep everything clear." I nodded, relieved. "That sounds like the right plan." Debbie smiled. "And you won't have to worry about me spending too much time with him anymore." I chuckled. Thank God for that. We returned to the party where Betty was waiting. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah, better than ever," I said. Debbie grinned. "We've sorted everything out. Jamal will report to Marty from now on." Betty smiled. "That's good to hear." Later after the party, Debbie and I sat together at home. "This made me realize something," she said. "What's that?" I asked. "I need to be better at communicating with you. I should have told you about Jamal sooner." I kissed her head. "And I should have spoken up instead of letting it bother me." She smiled. We've learned now. Yes, we're in this together, I agreed. That night as we went to bed, I held her close, grateful for the love and trust we shared. Everything was back where it needed to be.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I woke up in a hospital bed, disoriented and unsure of how I had ended up there. Pain radiated from my right arm, shoulder, and left side, and my entire body ached. My name is Henry Colton, and I was 41 years old when I found myself in this tangled situation. As my surroundings began to come into focus, I tried to piece together the events that had landed me here. Growing up, my life revolved around the pursuit of financial stability. My family didn't have much, but it wasn't until high school that I realized just how little we actually had. The absence of even the simplest luxuries became glaringly obvious. By the time I was 14, I had taken it upon myself to cover my own expenses, clothes, school supplies, and anything extra I wanted. I hustled constantly, taking on any job I could find. For 2 summers, I worked on the back of a gypsy garbage truck. I also cleaned classrooms after school, washed dishes at a local diner, and eventually saved up enough money to buy my own car and pay for its insurance once I got my license. Money mattered to me, but I wasn't frivolous with it. I treated myself occasionally to small indulgences, a burger, a candy bar, but only sparingly and never without thought. I was a very good student and had received many full scholarships offers. I chose the University of Michigan and graduated with dual degrees in electrical engineering and electronic design. I invented and patented an improved miniature microphone, a very small video camera, and several different sound and motion detector alarms. I licensed some of those patents, and with the money, I started a security equipment manufacturing company. I met Clara Wesley at a company function where my company hosted our customers and potential customers. I was and am founder and COO of Hardwired Security Incorporated, a small but significant home security company. We do not actually wire or monitor homes, but we invent, design, and produce the gadgets needed. In spite of our name, most of our products were Wi-Fi and Bluetooth compatible and had battery backup so they would continue to work if the power failed for any reason. I was making a decent salary when I met Clara, but it wasn't in the stratosphere because I was rolling 90% of the after-expenses profit back into the company. I was still very well paid for a 26-year-old electronics geek of that time. Clara was with her boss Walter Williams, the purchasing agent for Williams Home Safety Company. His daddy was the big cheese, but Walter and I had a good professional relationship. He was all business when it was about business. When not doing business, he was an all-out skirt chaser. He was a couple of years older than me, but was on wife number 3. He introduced his assistant Clara to me. Then he introduced me to her. Of course, he had to add that I was COO, shareholder, and single. Clara took on an almost acquisitive look as she tried to make small talk. I dismissed her interest immediately by saying, "What Walter said is true, but what he failed to say is that I only get a salary that is just a little more than what my highest paid engineer gets. I am not rich by any means, just lucky with some of my inventions. I also have some of the smartest electronics geeks in the country working for my company." She stared at me for a few seconds and then said, "I'm sorry. My surprise at your age overcame my polite upbringing. I was just very impressed that someone our age was able to own and run such an important company. Our company uses more products from your plants than all of the other suppliers combined." We talked business for a few more minutes, and I excused myself to mingle with the guests. I spent about 25 minutes walking around and talking to the various people before the food and soft drinks were brought out and the buffet was set up. As my guests were getting their food and drinks, I watched and saw Clara had kept moving to the rear of the line. At the same time, she was sideways watching me. If I had thought about it, I would have realized that she was stalking me to get close. I did not have a lot of experience with women, as I was mostly a nose-to-the-grindstone person. Clara saw her target, and I never knew what the license number of the truck that was Clara Wesley. I didn't call her, she called me. Where she got my personal phone number from I never did find out. We dated for more than a year, and she was getting more aggressive. It was putting me off, so I told her that I didn't want to see her outside of business anymore. Well, that worked for about 2 months, and then she started to show up wherever I was when not at work. She joined my church. She managed to get invited to family dinners, even though I never introduced her to my family. It was so bad I told my parents that if she was at another family function, it would be the last one I was at. Well, that seemed to cool her pursuit off. But when she wasn't around, I felt something was missing. I knew what it was, but I wasn't about to start up with her again without some serious and unbreakable ground rules. After about 3 months, I called Clara and we talked. She was pleasant, but told me she was glad she wasn't seeing me anymore because she started dating Walter. I had heard that he had gotten dumped by Mrs. Matthews number 3. It seems, at least according to Clara, that Walter was not the one she wanted. Well, so much for new ground rules. I ended the call. I then took stock of my life. I decided to cut back on the 60-hour work weeks, the 7-day work weeks, and the obsession of work. It took about a month of normal work weeks when I discovered that I had a lot more energy and I was better focused at work. The most important improvement I made was I was able to leave work at the office. With my new time and energy, I decided to take dance lessons. I always envied the guys who never seemed to be off their feet at weddings and dances that I attended. It was enlightening and fun, as well as ego-boosting. I discovered a love of country dances, especially line dances. I also started to go out to a little country music dance hall that was on the edge of town. The dance floor would be crowded if more than 8 couples were on it, but when line dances were called, we made 3 rows, and the inside row alternated face one of the outside rows. It was great fun. Then about 6 months after the phone call, I was at a cousin's wedding, and Clara was there with a different guy. Apparently, Walter was no more. As I was part of the wedding party, there was no way Clara could not miss the fact that I was there. She left her date and asked to talk to me. I was a little dubious, but I also never disliked her, just her tactics. I told her she had to introduce me to her date, and I would ask him to excuse us for about 15 minutes. She agreed. She did. He didn't, and left the reception without her. We talked and danced for the rest of the party. I took her home and left before she could invite me in. I was afraid to start something up again. Well, about 3 days later, I got a letter from her at my office. Henry, I know that I messed up before by being too aggressive. I would like to start dating you again. I will do my best to let us proceed at a rate of intimacy that you are comfortable with. I know that I told you that Mrs. Walter III told him he was not the one. I was the real reason they broke up. She caught us at a motel when he was supposedly at a business conference in Seattle. His dad fired him and removed him from all of the ownership of the company. His younger brother Tom will now be the heir apparent. I know I have come across as aggressive. I apologize for that. I like you, and I was pushing for more because I think I was beginning to love you. To put your mind at ease, I will not pursue you after you read this letter. That does not mean that I don't hope you will call me to go out together again. Clara. Well, I thought about it for 3 months, and on a Wednesday, I called and asked her to dinner for the coming Friday. I thought that would be a good restarting point. It was. We started dating, and after about 6 weeks we were sexual intimate. That woman knew more ways to screw than I ever heard or read about. I thought guys were 60-second wonders. Clara was just what a fragile romantic ego like I had needed. We dated for about a year, and I asked her to marry me. She jumped into my arms and chanted yes, yes, yes. We were planning the wedding when my mother strongly recommended that I should protect my assets with a prenuptial agreement. I had my attorney drew up an agreement that made sure that my trust would not be vulnerable in case of a divorce. He also recommended that I place all of the patents in the ownership of the trust. That would mean that the income from them would also be protected. Well, I was surprised that Clara did not make a fuss about the prenup. She did take it to her attorney and then signed with only one change. She and her attorney added a strict adultery clause. I signed the addendum. The wedding was small, but the reception was almost a circus. Most of the people from my company and from Williams Home Security were there. As it was a warm Saturday afternoon, and we had rented a pavilion and grounds from a local church camp, it was a mob scene, but all in all, very well-behaved mob. Clara was mingling with our guests when I saw Walter take hold of her arm and try to lead her away. He must have sensed that I was watching because he started to look around for me. As soon as he saw me, he let go of her arm as if it was on fire. I headed over toward them, as Clara had not seen Walter's face. I only caught the last words from Clara. I told you we were done when you cheated on me. I love my husband, and I never want to be near you again. Walter took off, and a few minutes later, I saw his car driving off. At the time, I was extremely angry with a man I thought was my friend. He was hitting on my wife on my wedding day for crying out loud. I was pleasantly surprised when Clara filed a sexual harassment complaint against Walter. It didn't go anywhere, because the complaint cited the reception as when and where it happened and Walter no longer worked for the company. Clara quit, and we basically blew the incident off as out of our control. Clara found a new job, as my administrative assistant. My past assistant moved to a different state to be with her new chump of the month, and she didn't even pick up her last paycheck. I was almost 30 when we married, and Clara wanted to start a family. I was 33 when Sam was born, and I was a proud papa. Clara decided to be a full-time mom, and while we tried for the next 4 years, we never had another child. I had a vasectomy when we had been married for 6 years, and so there would be no more kids. Clara went back to work when Sam started 2nd grade. She found a job with a local company as an administrative assistant to the plant manager. Things were great until 6 months or so before I woke up in the hospital. Clara had started making snide little digs about me, not getting my share of the profits from the company. That bitching stopped when I started to present her with bills for half of the monthly expenses. Half was more than her entire take-home pay. Then she started to withhold any affection. No hugs, no kisses, and definitely no sex. I moved into the guest room. Then came the clincher. I overheard her talking on her phone to someone named Thomas. I can't yet. I needed to figure a way to get him to divorce me or die. I don't want him to die, but if he did, I would have it all instead of the half I would get in a divorce. Anyway, I can't do anything with you away from work until either of those happen. Then she turned around and saw me. She immediately ended the call and looked extremely guilty. The only Thomas the first knew was a department manager at the plant. I didn't say anything at the time because Sam was near. After he went to bed, I grabbed Clara, not too gently, by the arm and dragged her into the living room. I didn't say anything about the phone call. I just started by saying, I know and you know that you have been a cold and heartless bitch for almost 6 months. I am telling you right now that it stops. If I want sex, you will drop your panties immediately and grab your ankles. If I insist, you will contribute to the family finances up to 75% of your take-home. If you make one more uncalled for snide remark or insult, you are out the door. Do you understand? By the time I finished, I was shouting. I was in control, and my rage was tamped down, but I needed to sound outraged. Clara looked at me like I had grown horns. She started to say something, but I interrupted her. One more insult, angry tirade against me, or a denial of sex and you are gone. My company owns this house, and I will burn it to the ground before you can get it in a divorce. Is a divorce what you want? She just crumbled off the couch and laid on the floor crying. I got up and went into the guest room and started moving my stuff back in the master. Clara was still on the floor when I was done, but she had fallen asleep. I covered her up and went to bed, locking the bedroom door. The next day after Clara went to work, I placed bugs all through the house and had her car bugged by one of my techs. We manufactured the security equipment, but we also knew how and where to use it. That night, a very contrite Clara came home from work and made dinner for the first time in over a month. She also gave me a look of almost respect, tinged with fear. I didn't want fear. I wanted my loving wife back. It was not to be. I had a few more plans up my sleeve. I stayed up after she went to bed and loaded her phone with the recorder app so all of her calls were recorded and cloned to me. I went to bed and a tearful Clara asked if I wanted to make love. I told her no, very abruptly. She rolled away from me and started to silently cry. I didn't ever make love to her again. Well, Thomas was quite the naughty boy. He called Clara on her cell while they were both working, and the two of them talked of finding a way to get my money in my company. The plot suggestion started out bizarre, and gradually over a 2-week period got down to some serious planning. I was going to be killed in a mugging, and the mugging was going to look like random street violence. I hadn't been idle while this was going on. I moved all of our bank money and contents of the safe deposit box to a different bank with only my signature on it. I changed the beneficiary of my insurance policy to Sam with the proceeds to be held in trust until he started college or turned 21. I changed the beneficiary of the trust to Sam with the same provision and restrictions. Then I did something that saved my life. I bought the best undershirt body armor that was on the market. It was not just designed to reduce the chance of dying from a gunshot wound to the torso, but also was designed to protect against knife wounds. My purchase of the body armor was noticed by the police, and a detective showed up at my work and questioned me about my reason. I played the recording of the plan for him, and he told me I had a good reason. Then he said, "We really can't do anything about the plot because we can't use the evidence you have collected. That being said, we will keep a watch on you during your drives to work and back. I know that isn't much help, but it is all we can legally do until an attempt is made." So, 3 days after the detective's visit, I hear him in the hospital. The vest prevented the bullets from killing me, but I did receive 2 broken ribs, and when I fell down, I managed to break my ankle and knock myself out. I did take a bullet in the arm. My police escort caught Thomas Grayson as he was trying to flee the scene. When they interrogated him, he couldn't wait to give up Clara. It seems that they had been approached by Walter Williams about buying my company. He knew about their affair, and they were offered a price they didn't ignore. All 3 of them were arrested while I lay unconscious in the hospital. Each was held on a $2.5 million bond. an amount none of them could manage to post. Once I was discharged, I made some big changes. I sold my company but held on to the patents, ensuring my hard work wouldn't go to waste. Sam and I relocated to Alabama, where I filed for divorce from Clara. Because her actions were part of a criminal plot to claim my estate, she walked away with nothing. The trio of conspirators was found guilty of attempted murder and received lengthy prison sentences. Justice was served, but the experience left its scars. Sam, with the energy and optimism of youth, is determined to play matchmaker, constantly trying to set me up with the single moms of his friends. But for now, I'm not ready to re-enter the world of dating or romance. I've started fresh with a new career, working as a systems installer and supervisor for a statewide home security company. It's fulfilling, and I'm excited to tinker with some ideas for new gadgets. Life goes on, and so do I. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Mark Hurley reflected on his life as he sat alone in the dark. He thought he had it all: a great job, a nice house, and a loving wife. Now, he only had the first two. He remembered his nearly 5-year marriage with Allison. They met at Marcus Financial Group, where she started in admin support before becoming executive assistant to his boss, Jake Marcus, 7 months ago. Jake's grandfather founded the company, which is now led by his father, Alan. Alan brought Jake into the business after college to learn the ropes, and Jake quickly became regional manager. Although destined to be CEO, Jake's promotion was years away. Mark respected Alan, who helped him transition to civilian life after being wounded in the Middle East. They met during Mark's physical therapy when Alan saw potential in him and offered him a job on the spot. Mark, having just finished his business degree before deploying, accepted and started working for Alan 8 years ago. He completed therapy, earned an MBA, and fell for Allison when she joined the company. They dated, fell in love, and got married, with Alan generously paying for their honeymoon in Hawaii. 3 years later, Jake joined the company. But unlike his father, he was arrogant and alienated his colleagues. Alan confided in Mark about his concerns regarding Jake's behavior. "You know I'll have to make him the regional manager eventually, Mark," Alan said. "I know. I'm counting on you to lead by example and help Jake transition into the job. Think you can do that?" Alan asked. "I think so, but it won't be easy," Mark replied. "What's your honest opinion of him, Mark? No sugarcoating," Alan insisted. "He's too arrogant and doesn't listen to others. He spends too much time flirting and throwing his name around. Allison says he's a carnal maltreatment lawsuit waiting to happen," Mark said. Alan shook his head. "I was afraid of that. His mother spoiled him. I hoped the job would help him mature. I'll talk to him." "When is Bill retiring?" Mark asked. "Bill Collins, the current regional manager, plans to retire in the next 6 months. He bought a place in North Idaho for retirement," Alan explained. Alan left, promising to stay in touch. Mark knew he would. There were other things Mark noticed about Jake but didn't tell Alan. Bill retired a few months later and Jake took over. Jake made some good changes, but also micromanaged and moved people around too much, causing frustration. One day, 7 months ago, Jake came to Mark's office. "I've been thinking about hiring a new EA, and I think Allison would fit nicely," he said. "My wife? That Allison?" Mark asked. "Yes, Gretchen is retiring soon, and we need new blood," Jake replied. "Have you talked to Allison?" Mark asked. "Not yet. I wanted your input first." "What's she like at home?" Jake asked, smirking. Mark didn't like the direction of the conversation. "Allison and I are happily married, and she's a professional. If you think she's qualified, offer her the job. It's her decision, but remember, she's married to me." "I get it. If she takes the job, it might mean travel. Are you okay with that?" Jake asked. "I trust my wife. If she accepts, she knows the boundaries. I expect you to respect our marriage," Mark said firmly. "Of course, Mark. I respect you and your marriage," Jake said, still smirking. "There might even be a promotion for you." That night, Mark talked to Allison. "Did you talk to Jake today?" "Yes, he mentioned the EA position," she replied. "What do you think?" Mark asked. "It means travel and late hours, but also a nice raise. We could use the money for when we have kids," Allison said. "Are you concerned about anything?" Mark asked. "I'm aware of the rumors, but do you trust me?" she asked. "Of course I trust you, but I don't trust him. He asked about you at home, which felt inappropriate," Mark said. "That's just Jake." "What did you tell him?" she asked. "I said you're a joy to be around and that we're happily married," Mark replied. "Good. I think I'll take the job," Allison decided. They went to bed and made love before falling asleep. Allison took the job, traveling every 2 weeks and working late 3 nights a week. Mark supported her and saw nothing unprofessional. Then, over 3 months ago, Alan had a massive stroke and died that night. The company was devastated, and everyone attended his funeral. Jake expected to become CEO, but the board appointed David Matheson as interim CEO, considering Jake too inexperienced. Determined to prove himself, Jake overworked Allison, making her travel and work late, straining their marriage. Their bed life dwindled, Allison's wardrobe became more revealing, and she grew demanding and short-tempered. One Sunday, Mark confronted Allison after a New York trip. "Allison, we need to talk." "About what?" she snapped. "About us. Jake's schedule is liquidating us. We need time off to reconnect." "I'm sorry, Jake's busy. Things are crazy." "Tell Jake you're taking a week's vacation. We need this." After a pause, she agreed. "You're right. I'll talk to him tomorrow." The next day, Allison came home happier. Jake agreed. "We can take next week off if we attend a party at his place Friday night." "Party? What kind?" "Just a small get-together with friends." Mark felt uneasy, but agreed, provided Allison came home early the rest of the week. "Do you know any of these people?" "I've met some," Allison said. "Mostly college friends of his, a couple are clients, not sure who else." "I see," Mark said. "All right, but come home at a normal hour this week, okay?" "I think so. We have the Henderson account dinner meeting on Wednesday, though." Mark knew the Henderson account was a priority since Alan's stroke. "Okay, Wednesday night, but home on time the rest of the week." "Deal," she smiled, wrapping her arms around him. "Deal," she whispered, kissing him. The next afternoon, Jake came to Mark's office, smirking. "What can I do for you, Jake?" Mark asked. "Allie says you're on for Friday night." "Allie?" Mark thought. "Yes, as long as she gets home on time the rest of the week and we get next week off. We have the Henderson dinner on Wednesday." "What's the party like?" Mark asked. "Who will be there?" "Just a casual get-together, a few college buddies and a client. Come casual. Just bring Allie." Mark nodded. "By the way, Mark, Allie is great at her job. I appreciate you letting her do it without giving her a hard time. I'd be lost without her." Mark didn't know how to respond. "Glad you're satisfied with her work. One thing, though." "What's that?" Jake asked. "Do you call her Allie to her face?" "Of course. Why? Just curious." That night, he asked Allison, "Do you let Jake call you Allie? You never let me." "He's my boss. He can call me whatever he wants," she said. Mark dropped it, but it bothered him. The week went well, and except for Wednesday night, she was home on time. And they made love often. Friday night, Mark dressed casually and watched Allison get ready. Her dress was new, much shorter and revealing. She wore a strip he hadn't seen before and no bra. The dress had slits up the sides, exposing a lot of skin, with an open back almost revealing her strip. He could see her bosom swell against the material. "Wow, you look amazing. Maybe we should stay home." She smiled. "No, later." "Where did you get that dress? It doesn't look casual." "I got it in New York. Jake asked me to wear it tonight." "Of course. Be careful, someone might get the wrong idea," she chuckled. "I don't think so. Everyone knows their boundaries." "They better." He hugged her and tried to kiss her, but she waved him off. "Later. I don't want to mess up my makeup." They drove to Jake's townhouse in a ritzy part of town. When Jake opened the door, Mark smelled marijuana and felt uneasy. 3 young men were introduced, John Whitehead, George Franklin, and Alan Jenkins, who worked for Henderson. "Guys, this is Mark Hurley," Jake said with a grin. "Mark, meet John, George, and Alan." Mark shook hands and wondered why Jake called him the man of the hour and didn't introduce Allison. "My God, Allie, you look hot in that dress," Jake said. The men nodded appreciatively as Allison modeled the dress. Mark didn't like Jake's reaction. "Let me get you drinks." "Allie, white wine? Mark?" "That's fine, I don't drink much." Mark actually had a high booze tolerance but quit drinking years ago. He didn't want to risk it tonight. Jake returned with drinks. Allison took a big sip, while Mark took small sips, staying sober. Jake invited everyone to the living room. Mark noticed Allison sat on a love seat, and Jake quickly sat next to her. Mark took a seat opposite them, watching closely. "Sorry, old buddy, force of habit," Jake said. "No problem," Mark replied, glancing at his wife. They chatted until Jake asked, "My dad said you were in the Marines?" "Yes, 5 years before a medical discharge," Mark answered. John asked, "You ever see combat? Eliminate anyone?" Mark nodded. "Both." Allison looked surprised. "You never told me that." It's not something I like to talk about. George pulled out a bag of marijuana. He rolled a joint and passed it around. Mark declined. Thanks, but no. I like to keep a clear head. Jake insisted. Lighten up, Mark. It's a party. You go ahead. I'd rather stay sober. Your loss. Besides, you can stay here if you get too messed up. You're off next week anyway. He turned to Allison. Rifle? Allison smiled and nodded. Sure. Jake blew smoke into her mouth, and she inhaled, coughing slightly. That's good stuff, she said. Mark was stunned, not recognizing this side of her. Jake handed the joint back to George. This man, Jake said, pointing at Mark, is the best business analyst in the company. He saved us millions and brought me this lovely assistant. Allison smiled at Jake, and Mark noticed it was more than just a polite smile. She seemed to hang on his every word. I think of her as my work wife, Jake said, patting Allison's bare thigh. Mark thought he saw Jake's hand inch under her dress before pulling back. I'd be lost without her, Jake added. So would I, Mark said, watching Allison look down. I need to use the restroom, Mark said, breaking the silence. First door on the left, Jake directed. In the bathroom, Mark locked the door and looked in the mirror, thinking Allison might be cheating with Jake. He remembered Alan's advice about paying attention to details. Mark noticed several troubling signs. Allison's revealing dress, her interaction with Jake, her sudden pill use, and Jake calling her his work wife. He decided he needed proof. He discreetly started a video recording on his phone. Returning to the room, Mark saw Allison sit up quickly, with white powder on her nose. The others had it too. Mark sipped his drink and saw undissolved powder at the bottom. What the hell? He felt suddenly tired and incoherent. Are you okay? Allison asked. Jake and the men stood up, with Allison grabbing Jake's arm. Mark tried to stand, but couldn't. Take a nap, Mark, Jake said as the men put his feet up. Allison removed his shoes, and Mark noticed her strip on the love seat. Allison covered him with an Afghan. I'm sorry, Mark, I really do love you, she whispered, kissing his forehead. He fell into a deep sleep. When he woke, the house was dark and silent except for snoring upstairs. He realized he'd been out for over 3 hours. He stopped the video recording and crept upstairs. In the master suite, he saw Allison unclothed on Jake's bed with one leg over him. One of the 3 men was also undressed next to her. The other 2 were asleep, one on a couch and the other in a recliner. Mark quietly returned downstairs. He needed to find out what they dosed him with, so he rummaged through Jake's kitchen and found a Tupperware container. He poured the drink into it and sealed it. Back in the front room, he took Allison's keychain from her purse and found an unfamiliar key. He pocketed it, then grabbed Allison's phone, intending to check it later. He placed his wedding ring on her purse so she'd see it, put on his shoes, and crept to the door. Details, he thought. He looked for a security system, but didn't see one. The unfamiliar key fit the door perfectly. He locked the door behind him and quietly left, not turning on his car lights until he was on the street. He drove to a convenience store and called his old friend R.K. Evans, who ran a private investigative firm. Hello? A sleepy R.K. answered. Hey, R.K., it's Mark. Sorry to call late, but I need your help. What's up, Mark? You need bail or something? Not quite. Can you be at my place in 20 minutes? Yeah, sure. Everything all right? I'd rather not talk about it over the phone. Gotcha. See you in 20. Thanks, buddy. Semper Fi. Hoorah, R.K. replied. Mark bought a 12-pack of beer and cigarettes. He hadn't smoked since leaving the service, but needed something to calm him. At home, he put the beer in the fridge, lit a cigarette, and sat on the couch, using a candy dish for an ashtray. R.K. arrived, and Mark offered him a beer. He explained the night's events. Holy crap, R.K. said when Mark finished. Mark handed him the container with the dosed wine. Can you get this analyzed? R.K. nodded. It'll be Monday or Tuesday before I get results. I need everything on Jake Marcus, John Whitehead, George Franklin, and Alan Jenkins. Jenkins works for Henderson Manufacturing. Here's a video of them. Got it, R.K. said. Do you want surveillance inside Jake's place and yours? Yeah, if you can. I have a key. I didn't see a security system. R.K. took the key. No problem. How'd you get this? I took it from Allison's keychain. R.K. nodded. You probably can't use any video from inside his place as evidence. I figured. This is personal. I understand, R.K. said. Mark handed him an extra key to his house and the security system code. I can set up equipment now, R.K. offered, returning the key. High-def cameras, audio, even record landline calls. Do it, Mark said. How much will this cost? Don't worry about it. You saved my skin in the Middle East. This is the least I can do. Thanks, old friend. At least let me cover your costs. All right, RK said. Let's go through the video for clues. Mark started the video from the beginning. Stop right there, RK said. Mark paused it. Back up a bit. They watched as the camera captured Allison finishing a line of white powder on the coffee table. Mark stopped the video. Damn, Mark said. I saw her just as she sat up. That definitely looks like powder on the table. Yes, it does, RK replied. Interesting. Have you ever known Allison to use pills? Mark shook his head. No, never. Let's see what else is on here. Mark resumed the video, and they watched as he sat on the couch across from Allison. Hold up. Mark paused the video. What's that on the love seat? RK asked. Mark looked closely. It's Allison's strip. I saw it before I passed out, but thought I was imagining it. She must have taken it off after I went to the bathroom. He resumed the video, and they saw when the pill affected Mark. The camera showed him lying down, with the others looking down at him. They heard Allison ask if he was okay, and Jake telling him to take a nap. Allison then leaned over and whispered in his ear. You sure you don't want to tie him up and make him watch us? George asked. No, Allison said. This is enough for one night. We have all week. We can always step things up if he doesn't go along, Jake said. You know John swings both ways. Maybe he could show Mark the other side, he added, laughing. Mark's face turned red as he heard Allison join in. I'd like to see that, she said. Really? John asked. You'd let me screw your husband? Sure, why not? She said. Maybe if you're nice, you can get him to do more. They all laughed again. I've never done a Marine before, John said, but I doubt he can give as good a head as you. Mark fought the urge to throw his phone. Seriously, Jake, is he going to be okay? You didn't give him too much, did you? Allison asked. Nah, he'll be fine, Jake said. He'll sleep for about 12 hours and wake up with a headache. He'll think he drank too much. Tomorrow I'll introduce him to the really hard stuff. By next week, old Mark will be a powder user. Maybe I'll even have him work the street for me. Too bad dear old Dad isn't around to see his golden boy fall. Is that why you hate him? Allison asked. That's all I heard about in college, Jake said. How Mark went to school while serving and fighting for America. How he worked hard while defending the country. Sometimes I thought Dad would rather have Mark as a son than me. Well, guess what, Dad? I'm Mark's boss now. I have Mark's woman, and by next week, your golden boy will be a powder user. They all laughed. Are you boys with me? Jake asked. They all said yes. What about you, Allie? Are you with me? If not, you'll be on the street with him. I'm with you, sweetie, Allison replied. I've grown to love this too much to walk away. They assumed she was referring to Jake's manhood. All right then, Jake said. Let's go upstairs and start the real party. Goody, Allison said, heading upstairs. This time make me airtight. The video recorded sounds of lovemaking from the bedroom. Mark stopped the video and put his head in his hands. RK placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. This is going to be tough, but we'll get you through it, RK said. Mark nodded. Thanks, RK. What will you do? I'm divorcing her. No doubt about it. I understand. Why don't you get away for a few days? Let me handle this. What are you planning? Mark asked. It's best you don't know. We just witnessed a criminal conspiracy. Someone will go to jail, but we need you safe. But I can help, Mark insisted. RK shook his head. No, you're in danger. Remember Gunny Johnson? He's in Vegas now. He owes me favors and can set you up with a place. Okay, let me wire the place for audio and video first, Mark said. Stay focused, understand? Yes, thanks, RK. You're a good friend. RK smiled. Semper Fi, bro. Do or die. Hurrah, Mark replied. Mark went to the porch with a beer while RK wired the rooms and tapped the phone. He set up the audio and video to be stored on a cloud server and gave Mark access details and the switch for the system. I'll call Gunny tomorrow and let you know. Don't do anything stupid. Understand? I understand, RK. Good. Hang tough, my friend. I'll be in touch. Thanks again for everything, Mark said. After RK left, Mark turned on his computer and checked his bank accounts. He still had an account in his name from before the marriage, into which he had been depositing 10% of his earnings. Originally meant as a surprise for Allison, he transferred half of their joint account funds into this old account and paid off and canceled their joint credit cards. He still had a personal credit card from his original account. He packed clothes for a few days and loaded the suitcases into his car. Inside the house, his eyes fell on their wedding portrait over the fireplace. Filled with rage at her betrayal, he shredded the portrait with a hunting knife and tossed all photos of Allison into the fireplace. He also added her wedding dress, but decided to wait before burning everything, wanting her to witness it. Grabbing a beer, he emailed the incriminating video to himself and verified it on his laptop. He wrote a carefully worded letter to each board member and David, the interim CEO, detailing what had transpired. He reminded the board about the morals clause in Jake's employment agreement and the potential lawsuits and scandals his actions could cause. He expressed his respect for Alan and hoped the board would act appropriately. Satisfied with his letter, he attached the video and emailed it to David and the board, stating he would be on vacation but reachable by email or phone. He expected a response by Tuesday and planned to be away by then. He sat back, lit a cigarette, and watched as the heat burned Allison's face in the photo, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. He unlocked her phone using the code he had set up for her. Going through her texts, he became even more furious. They had been sleeping together for at least 6 months, but in the last 3, Allison had started openly disrespecting him. He found numerous pictures, Jake undressed, Jake and Allison kissing and dancing in a nightclub, likely in New York, and explicit photos of Allison with multiple men. There were videos, too, showing Allison having lovemaking with Jake and others, including the 3 men from the party. He realized this was what she had been doing on her work trips. He copied everything and emailed it to himself using her phone. By then, he had downed 6 beers and smoked half a pack of cigarettes, using her face in the photos as an ashtray. Seeing the sunrise, he knew Allison would wake soon and discover he had left. Expecting her to be up within an hour or 2, he grabbed his loaded rifle, locked the door, and lay on the couch, trying to get some sleep. Allison woke at 8:30, checked the clock on Jake's nightstand, and went to the bathroom to clean up. Jake and the others were awake by the time she came out. Jake threw on a robe and looked at her. "Want to go downstairs and start breakfast?" Jake asked. "Mark will probably want coffee if he's waking up." "Sure," she said, tossing on a robe and padding downstairs. She started a pot of coffee and went to wake Mark in the living room, but he wasn't there. The Afghan was tossed aside and his shoes were gone. She ran around checking the bathroom, but he wasn't there. She saw the car was gone and his ring on her purse. "Oh, crap," she gasped, running upstairs. Jake stopped her in the bedroom. "What's wrong?" "He's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" "He must have woken up and left. He took the car and left his ring." "Call him and get him to come back." "Okay," she said, running downstairs. She put Mark's ring in her purse and looked for her phone, but couldn't find it. By then, Jake was downstairs. "My phone is gone." "Use the house phone." "You don't understand. It's full of texts, pictures, and videos you sent. If he has it, he's seen them." "Don't worry. Just get him over here. We'll handle it. Now call him." Allison picked up the house phone and nervously dialed Mark's cell. "Hello?" Mark answered, sounding groggy. "Mark, sweetie, it's me." "What the hell do you want?" he growled. Allison recoiled. He had never spoken to her like that before. She realized he must be super pissed, but she had no idea just how much. "Mark, honey, you weren't here when I got up, and I was worried. Are you all right?" "What the hell do you care, witch?" "Sweetheart, I need you to come pick me up at Jake's house. Can you do that, please?" Mark laughed. "Screw you. I may have been clueless yesterday, but not anymore. You don't get to call me sweetheart or honey ever again. Mark, please don't be angry. I do love you." "Yeah, right, witch. Tell me another one." "Mark, we need to talk." "Damn right we do." "Then come pick me up at Jake's so we can talk on the way home." "Wrong answer, witch. I'm not coming over there. If you want to talk, walk or call an Uber. The only thing we need to discuss is how to split everything up." "What do you mean, split everything up?" "That's what happens in a divorce, witch." "I don't want a divorce. Can't we work this out?" "I didn't want to be dazed and cucked either. Get home if you want to talk, but don't let Jake or anyone else come here. I'm armed, and I'll blow their heads off if they step foot in my house. Got it?" "Okay, I'll call an Uber. Do that and bring cash, or your ATM card." "Why?" "Because your credit card doesn't work anymore." "Why doesn't it work?" "I canceled it last night." "Oh," she said quietly. "By the way, know where my phone is?" "Yeah, it's here on the coffee table." "Got an interesting collection of pictures and videos. Now I know what you've been doing these last 3 months. They'll help my divorce case." "Oh my God, Mark, I'm really sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." "Shut up, witch. Save your excuses for someone who cares. If you want to talk, do it now and come alone." "I'll be there, Mark." Ending the call, she looked at Jake. "Well?" Jake asked. "He's not coming. I have to go there to talk to him." All right, we'll take you then. She shook her head. No, he's armed. He said if any of you show up, he'd eliminate you. I've never heard him so angry. Jake thought for a moment, then went to his study. He came back with a syringe. Here's the plan. Put this in your purse. Call an Uber, and we'll follow you to your place. When you get a chance, inject this into his arm. Then call me. We'll pick him up and put him in my trunk. What is it? She asked. A special concoction, some dope, smack, and something to knock him out. It works fast and won't hurt him. Just stick him with it and call me when he's out. Got it? He handed her the syringe and she put it in her purse. Okay, she said. Just promise you won't hurt him. We'll do our best, right, boys? He said, looking at the three men who laughed. Call for your ride. She arranged an Uber to pick her up in 30 minutes and went upstairs to finish getting ready. When the driver arrived, she left. Jake and his friends followed, parking a block away. They didn't notice the white van parked across the street. A few minutes after speaking to Allison, Mark's phone rang. It was RK. What's up? Mark asked. Just wanted to let you know my boys picked up a conversation between your wife and her accomplices, RK said. What? Mark asked. Modern technology, my friend, RK said. A parabolic microphone picked it up. Your wife is getting an Uber, and her buddies are following. They're planning to dose you and kidnap you. It's in her purse. She'll hit you with it when she can. My boys will follow Jake and his crew. Damn, Mark said. Yeah, RK said. Be careful. I'll text you when they leave. Turn on the surveillance gear when she gets there, and I'll monitor it. I'm just down the street. I'll call the cops when needed. Be ready. Okay, thanks. About half an hour later, Mark got the text. On the move. Showtime, Mark muttered. He had about 20 minutes before they arrived, so he stashed the rifle where Allison wouldn't find it easily and turned on the surveillance gear. In the kitchen, he grabbed a Ziploc bag for the syringe and a tissue. Watching from the window, he saw the Uber pull up and Allison nervously exited the car, clutching her purse. He turned on the fireplace, setting the photos and her dress ablaze. When she walked in, she grimaced at the cigarette smoke. Her eyes widened at the sight of the burning portrait and her wedding dress. You're burning my wedding dress? Our pictures? Mark, why are you doing this? Tears streamed down her face, but Mark was unmoved. I wanted you to see what your actions have done to us. She glanced at the beer bottles and cigarette butts in her candy dish. I thought you had a low booze tolerance, and I never knew you smoked. I quit smoking, and as for drinking, I get mean when drunk. I nearly liquidated a man once. I chose not to drink again, just like you chose to become Jake's witch. Oh my God, Mark, what have I done? You tell me. What happened to you? You used to be so sweet and kind. Since when have you snorted cocaine? Who are these men you've been with? Mostly clients, she said quietly. Jake made me. Great. Your actions could ruin Marcus Financial. How long have you planned to pill me and assault me? Was that your idea or Jake's? She looked shocked. I never... she began, but Mark cut her off. Shut up, he said, pulling out his phone. He played the video of her and her accomplices talking over him. Her face turned white as she heard her own words. How did you get that? She asked. It doesn't matter, Mark said. What's important is that David and the board members now have this video. The police will have it too. We're getting divorced, and if I have my way, you'll be in prison for a long time. I just want to know why. You don't understand, she said. It's a long story. Maybe you can tell me one day when I'm not so inclined to wring your neck, Mark said. He saw her start to open her purse and ripped it off her shoulder, dumping the contents on the coffee table. He picked up the syringe with a tissue. Is this what you planned for me? Do you even know what it is? Not exactly. Not exactly, he asked sarcastically. You were going to inject me without knowing what it could do. You're one sick witch. Did Jake tell you to do this? She nodded. Yes. So if Jake told you to shove a hot poker up your bum, you'd do that too. You were supposed to inject me, then call him to come kidnap me, right? Ashamed, she nodded. Pretty much. All right, here's what we'll do. Call Jake, put it on speaker, and tell him you did it. I'll take it from there. Don't let him know I'm waiting, got it? You want me to set him up? Yes. Any questions? She shook her head. No, I understand. Good. Now do it, and no tricks. Mark watched as she called and put the phone on speaker. Jake, it's me, Allie. It's done, he's out. Good girl, we'll be right there. She ended the call and looked at Mark. He'll eliminate me when he sees you're not out. Tough luck. Remember, no signals. Otherwise, I might eliminate you myself. Mark sat in a recliner and waited. When he saw Jake and his three buddies through the window, he pretended to be asleep but kept his eyes slightly open. Jake walked in, looked at the mess, and started toward Mark. "You did good," Jake told Allison. "Now we're going to put him in the trunk." As Jake reached for Mark, Mark opened his eyes and smashed Jake in the throat. Before Jake could react, Mark kicked him hard in the lap. The other three men tried to help, but RK's team detained them. Jake fell to his knees, moaning in pain. Mark slipped behind him, pulled out his hunting knife, and grabbed Jake's hair, positioning the knife at his throat. "Make your peace with God," Mark growled. "I'm going to cut your head off." Jake pissed his pants in fear, and Allison recoiled in horror, wondering who this monster was. Mark began pressing the knife against Jake's throat when RK shouted, "Sergeant, don't do it. Drop the knife. The police are on their way." "He deserves to die," Mark exclaimed. RK knelt in front of Jake. "Yes, he does, but not by your hand. If you eliminate him, you'll end up in prison. Let the authorities handle it. Please, as a friend, put the knife down. He'll pay for what he's done." Mark looked at RK, feeling Jake trembling in fear. Slowly, he pulled the knife away and stood up. RK turned Jake over, zip-tied his hands, and told Allison to lay face down as he secured her hands. Hot tears fell from her eyes as she watched a picture of her and Mark burn in the fireplace. Mark sat on the couch, watching RK secure both Allison and Jake. The other three were secured in the front yard by RK's men. Police sirens grew louder as cruisers stopped in front of the house. "Hand me your phone," RK said. "I'll talk to the police before they come inside." Mark handed him the phone. As RK left, Jake turned to face Mark, his smirk finally gone. "My father always did love you more than me," Jake said. "Not true, Jake," Mark replied. "He always hoped you'd mature enough to step into his shoes one day." "Would you really have cut my head off?" Jake asked. "We'll never know, will we?" Mark replied. "But I promise you, where you're going, you'll meet people who won't hesitate like I did. And if you come after me again, I won't hesitate either." Jake laid his head back in silence. 3 large police officers entered, surveyed the scene, and read Jake and Allison their Miranda rights before escorting them to the cruisers. One officer picked up the syringe in the plastic bag from the coffee table. "Is this what they plan to use on you?" he asked Mark. "Yes, it is," Mark confirmed. The officer took Mark's full statement and said, "You were lucky. You know that?" "No, my fellow Marine had my back." The officer smiled and nodded. "Semper Fi," the officer said, shaking Mark's hand. "Ura," Mark responded. After the police left, RK joined Mark on the couch. "Got another one of those?" he asked, pointing at the beer bottles. "Think I have 1 or 2 left. Kinda early for this, don't you think?" "After this?" "No," RK said as Mark handed him a cold bottle. "How are you holding up?" "Okay. Feels like Iraq. I need to decompress." "Yeah, about that. I talked to Gunny. He'll take care of everything if you want to hang out in Vegas for a few days. Here's his number." "I might do that. Got some things to handle here first." RK handed Mark 2 cards. Gunny's number and a divorce lawyer, Michelle Hawkins. "She hates cheaters and expects you at 8 a.m. Monday." "Thanks for everything," Mark said. "Semper Fi, bro. Do or die," RK said. "Ura," Mark replied. After finishing their beers, RK stood up. "You have some cleaning to do. I'll be by later to get the surveillance gear." RK left, and Mark started cleaning the house. That afternoon, Mark received a call from David Matheson. "Mark, this is David Matheson," he said when Mark answered. "Yes, Mr. Matheson, what can I do for you?" Mark asked. "Call me David. I got your email and saw the video, as did the board. We agree with your letter, which was impressive." "Thank you, David." "You're welcome. We also agreed to terminate both Allison and Jake's employment immediately, given they're in custody. I'm heading to the county jail to handle it personally. There's something else." "What's that?" Mark asked. "We think you should take a few days to unwind. Do you have someplace to go?" "A friend offered to look after me in Vegas. I have a divorce lawyer appointment Monday, then I'll head out." "Vegas sounds perfect. Enjoy your trip, Mark. We'll see you a week from Monday." "Thanks, David. I will. One more thing. We unanimously decided you'd be the best person to take Jake's job." "Me?" Mark asked. "Yes. We're impressed with how you handled this, and the board values your work. There will be a salary increase and other benefits. You deserve it." "Thanks, David. Don't thank me yet. First, you'll oversee an external audit of everything Jake handled. The auditors will report to you, and you'll report to me." "I think that's a good idea. I've learned Jake had Allison engage in lovemaking with some clients." "Good God. Well, I'll leave that to you. Have a good trip and we'll see you a week from Monday. See you then, David, thanks. After the call, Mark finished cleaning the house and mowed the yard. He called Gunny Johnson and they caught up. So, you want to come out for a few days and have some fun? Gunny asked. Yeah, sure. All right, come on out. I'll set you up with a nice room and show you the ropes. But remember, this is Las Vegas, not Bangkok. They laughed. I'll remember, Gunny, Mark said. See you Monday evening. See you, Mark, Gunny replied. RK stopped by to gather his equipment. Quick update. Cops searched Jake's place and found a ton of pills, lovemaking toys, DVDs, and more. Jake was a real creep. My friend on the force said there's likely more illegal stuff they haven't found yet. Damn. RK stayed for dinner, and Mark fell asleep shortly afterward, mentally and physically exhausted. The next day, Mark tossed all of Allison's belongings into trash bags and hauled them to the garage, planning to wait on taking them to Goodwill until he knew she'd be going to prison. The following morning, he arrived at Michelle Hawkins's office at 8 a.m. She reviewed his evidence and paperwork, making notes as he spoke. She explained California's divorce laws, noting that everything is generally divided equally. Since they had no children and the house was his before marriage, he'd likely keep the house, while Allison would get the remaining half of their bank accounts. Her infidelity couldn't be brought up in the divorce, but the criminal charges might influence the judge. She also mentioned he probably wouldn't have to pay support while she was incarcerated, though that could change upon her release. I'll make this as painless as possible, Michelle assured him. I'll draw up the papers and have them served. If she signs, I'll present them to the judge, and it'll be a 6-month wait. Mark agreed and gave her a retainer. Before heading home, he stopped by the county jail to inform Allison he was filing for divorce. Sitting at a table, he watched as she was brought out, looking haggard in an orange jumpsuit. They picked up the handsets to communicate through the plexiglass shield. Hello, Allison. Hello, Mark. I wanted to let you know I'm filing for divorce. I saw an attorney today. I figured you would, she said. When is your arraignment? Tomorrow morning. The prosecutor is asking for no bail. That's probably best. Now tell me something honestly. What's that? She asked. What happened to you? She looked down, embarrassed. Things were going well at first. Jake seemed like any other executive. After Alan died, Jake got furious he wasn't promoted and blamed you. He thought his father set things up for you. That's crazy, Mark said. Alan hoped Jake would become CEO one day. I know, she said. We went to New York that weekend. At a club with clients, dancing and drinking, I flirted a bit, but didn't think I was out of line. Next thing I know, I felt really good and ended up in bed with 2 guys. Jake joined in later. She paused. The next morning, I felt guilty. Then Jake showed me pictures and videos he took and said I had to do whatever he wanted or he'd show you. So he blackmailed you, Mark said. And probably dazed you too. He did. He admitted it later. No surprise they found pills at his place. Did he get you on powder? She nodded. Yes, and dope and other stuff. How many clients did you sleep with? She shrugged. I don't know, several. Jake set it all up whenever we traveled. Mark shook his head. From the video, it seemed like you enjoyed dazing me, turning me into a powder user for Jake. Was Wednesday's dinner really about the Henderson project? She shook her head. No, we were planning Friday's party. So you planned it all in advance? Allison nodded. Yes, I'm sorry, Mark. That's the first thing you've said that I agree with. Can you forgive me? He chuckled. Not just no, but hell no. You cheated on me with that idiot and who knows how many others. Then you plotted to pill and assault me. You're out of your mind, and don't even ask if we can be friends. I understand, Mark. I hope it was worth it. Goodbye, Allison. He hung up as tears fell down her cheeks. He went home, packed, and headed for Vegas. He met up with Gunny Johnson, and they reminisced over dinner. Gunny then showed him around, gave him gambling tips, and escorted him to his room. Inside, a lovely young brunette sat on the bed. She stood up as they entered. Mark, this is Candy, Gunny said. She'll be your tour guide while you're here. Gunny, this isn't necessary, Mark said. Nonsense, son. This is exactly what you need after what your wife put you through. Relax, have a good time, and remember, what happens here stays here, usually. They laughed. I gotta go. You two have fun, Gunny added. Before he left, Mark turned to Candy. Tell me, are you an escort, courtesan? Not anymore, Candy said. Thanks to Gunny, I'm out of a bad situation. I'm clean, going to school, and working a real job. He told me about you and asked if I'd spend time with you. That's all. If you want, I'll leave and never bother you again. No, Mark said. He's right. I could use some companionship right now, and you're a very lovely woman. Would you like to go out for a drink?" "That sounds nice," she said, smiling. They went to the club, had a few drinks, talked and danced for a few hours. Back in his room, she helped him forget his troubles. He woke up to find her beside him. They showered together and got dressed. "I have classes today, but I can meet you back here tonight if you want," she said. "Sounds like a plan," he said. They kissed before she left, and he went downstairs for breakfast. Then he headed to the casino to try his luck. Following Gunny's advice, he walked away with about $300. He spent it on dinner, drinks, and a show with Candy that night. Once again, she rocked his world. The rest of the week went about the same, and by Friday, he was ready to go home and move on with his life. Candy hated to see him leave, but understood. She gave him her phone number and email address in case he wanted to reach out again. He liked her, but doubted it would turn into a full relationship. She was much younger and had her whole life ahead of her. Still, he thought, who knows? He drove home with a smile, memories of Candy filling his mind. When he got home, he caught up on news about Allison and her group. The judge, after reviewing the evidence from the prosecutor, ordered them held without bail. He also received confirmation from Michelle that Allison had been served divorce papers. According to Michelle, Allison signed them right away and they were filed with the court. In 6 months, he would be free of her for good. The following Monday, he went to work and found all his things moved into Jake's old office. Everyone welcomed him back and wished him well in his new position. He settled in and met the external auditors. He got them situated and met his new assistant, Marcia Bodine. He had known her since she started with the company a few years ago. He liked Marcia, knew she was married, and she had received high praise from her previous supervisors. She also knew his situation and was careful not to mention it. The audit uncovered several irregularities in Jake's paperwork. For instance, he had fudged his expense account on trips he and Allison had taken. Then the auditors found that Jake had mismanaged some client accounts. This was reported to the SEC, and Jake soon faced federal charges. Mark and David spent the next few months cleaning up the mess Jake left behind. Luckily, they didn't lose any clients thanks to their quick response, but they had several uncomfortable conversations with other executives who were understandably upset. Meanwhile, Mark stayed in touch with Candy, mostly through emails. Eventually, she told him she had met someone at school and they were serious. He wasn't surprised and wished her well. At the same time, Allison and Jake's trials dragged on with more charges and motions. Mark found himself testifying against his wife and her accomplices, even though her defense team tried to discourage him, saying he wasn't required to testify against his wife. "I may not be required to, but I want to," he told her lawyer. "Besides, in a few weeks, she won't be my wife anymore." The jury was stunned by his testimony, and even more so when the video Mark took that Friday night was played for them. Finally, the day came for the jury to announce their verdicts. Mark and David sat in the courtroom, watching as Allison, Jake, and the other 3 men were brought in. None of them could meet Mark's gaze. By now, the trial had become a media spectacle. The court was called to order, and the judge asked if the jury had reached a decision. The foreman stood and confirmed they had. Everyone held their breath as the judge read through the charges, which included conspiracy to kidnap and assault. Jake faced additional charges related to the pills found in his townhouse and the lewd photos and videos he had with other women. They were all found guilty on every charge. The judge set the date for sentencing, and the 5 convicted conspirators were led out of the courtroom. Mark and David walked out, brushing past the throng of reporters pushing cameras in their faces. About 10 days later, the sentencing took place. The judge made it clear he was thoroughly disgusted with all 5 of them and essentially threw the book at them. Jake's 3 buddies got the lightest sentences, but still faced 20 years in prison. Allison was sentenced to 25 years to life, and Jake received 50 years to life for his crimes. He would also face federal charges brought by the SEC to be handled in federal court. Allison sobbed as she was led out of the courtroom, while Jake looked down in shame as he was taken away. Jake's time in prison ended about 6 months later, when he was found decapitated in the shower, having angered the wrong people who didn't like his smug attitude. A month after the sentencing, Mark was in his office going over some paperwork when Marcia buzzed him on the intercom. "Mr. Hurley, there's a Dr. Kristen Marcus here to see you." The last name caught Mark's attention. "Send her in." The door opened and Mark saw an attractive blonde enter his office. Her hair fell below her shoulders and she wore a skirt that fell just below her knees. She smiled as she approached, extending her hand. "It's great to finally meet you, Mr. Hurley." He shook her hand and invited her to sit. "Please call me Mark. Would you like something to drink?" Coffee? Tea? Coffee would be wonderful. Black, please, and call me Kristen. Mark asked Marcia to get them each a cup of coffee and sat down as his assistant left the office. Marcus, Mark said, looking at her. Are you related to Alan? His daughter, perhaps? She smiled and shook her head. No, I'm his niece. I see. I'm surprised we haven't met before. I thought I knew everyone in Alan's family. I've been quite busy. I was in France when Uncle Alan died and couldn't make it back for his funeral. So, what can I do for you? He asked. I just wanted to meet the man who took my idiot of a cousin down. I take it there's no love lost between you two? She shook her head. No, none, she said quietly. I'm just glad he's finally paying for his crimes. I'm really sorry for what he did to you. From what I know, you didn't deserve any of it, and I'm sorry. I've heard a lot about you from my uncle. So, I see you're a doctor. Are you a medical doctor? No, I have a PhD in business and economics. I teach at UCLA. My uncle and I shared many interests, but I'm more focused on academics. And no, I'm not interested in moving into the corner office upstairs. Mark laughed at that. They talked for a while longer before she said she had to get back to work. Mark didn't want the conversation to end, and, truth be told, he was interested in this woman. Listen, Kristen, I'd love to continue this discussion over dinner, that is, if you don't mind being seen in public with a lowly MBA. She smiled and her eyes sparkled. There's nothing lowly about being an MBA, and I'd love to be seen with you in public. Dinner sounds great. How about Red Lobster tonight at 7 o'clock? She handed him a card with her number and address. Red Lobster it is, Mark said, taking the card from her. I'll pick you up at 6:30 if that works. I'll see you then. Mark, it's been great meeting you, she said before walking out. That evening, Mark learned from Kristen that Jake had tried to assault her when she had just turned 18. Ashamed and afraid she might be blamed, she never said anything but avoided Alan and his family as much as possible. She also avoided relationships with men because of Jake's actions and spent months in therapy while in college. He told her about his experience with Jake and what happened with Allison. Kristen was shocked, but not surprised. I'm so sorry. You deserve much better. Mark and Kristen dated for several months, falling in love. She nearly tackled him to the floor, smothering him with kisses when he asked her to marry him. I take it that's a yes? Mark asked when she finally let him breathe. No, that's a hell yes, she said. Now carry me to bed and ravish me properly. Yes, ma'am, Mark said, carrying his bride-to-be upstairs. Yes, he thought, things were looking good.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
In today's story, we have Ted who gets betrayed by his wife Kathy, for who chose OnlyFans over her marriage and then tried to destroy Ted in court. If you like our stories, please comment and please hit the subscribe button for more tales. My name is Ted. I'm 48 years old and 2 years ago I got divorced from Kathy who was married to me for over 10 years. Well, it has been a few years and you must be wondering why did I come her after such a long time. A few days back I saw a video on YouTube where Joe Smith is in an argument with his wife about her joining OnlyFans. So, we have Joe Smith, former NBA player. He was the first at the 1995 NBA draft. Did not have a great career, but it was okay. He moved from one team to the other. I guess it was 12 different times. He was a journeyman. He married Kisha Chavis. She went by her screen name Kiss Major, aka Yasmin Pendavis. Don't ask me how I know the details. You can say I have seen her perform few years ago. I have seen her almost 50 times with different movies. That is for Joe Smith. He will deal with her wife, I hope. Why are we discussing him again? His viral incident has brought some painful memories from my marriage. I married Kathy after dating her for 2 years. I used to work as a cameraman and at a studio that was making not-so-noble movies. You see, I was a student and needed money to finish my graduation. Kathy had joined our team as a makeup artist. Her job was to ensure that women looked good. The moment I saw her, I was smitten. She was petite and was beautiful. I was not sure why she was here. Once the day was over, I walked up to her and asked her name and started a conversation. Walking up to her became a daily activity. We became good friends and soon I asked her out on a date. One date became 2, and later we were in love. I soon left my job as a cameraman and I was now working in a bank. I was making good money. I asked to leave her job and move in with me. She agreed and 2 years later we got married. I was making good money, but I had to work hard. Kathy was taking care of the house. I used to ensure that all her desires are fulfilled. She was wearing good clothes, good shoes, eat at nice restaurants, go on a vacation twice in a year. Living the American life. We did not have kids yet. It sounds like a simple story, right? Like all the stories that I read or listen online, mine was about to go haywire. I had a small accident, and it wrecked my knee. I was to stay at home for the next 2 months. During this time, since I was not able to go out, Kathy was not very happy as her outings had stopped. To make sure that she was happy, I let her go out with her friends. She did have a friend circle back from her days as a makeup artist. She used to go out with them at some days. I did not pay a lot of attention to it. So, for the next 2 months while I was trying to recover, Kathy enjoyed and partied with her girls. She had started her own Instagram page and used to show off her skills as a makeup artist with other models. I did not mind as she was making some money and was not bored with her life. For the next few months, I recovered and Kathy was getting popular. One fine day, Kathy came home fuming and threw her bag on the bed near me. I asked what happened. She did not say anything. She came over me and made wild love to me. Once we were done and laying there, I asked her what came over her today. She said that she had a fight with a former corn actor, Candy. I asked what happened, to which she told me that Candy berated Kathy, that she is now a housewife with no future and no money. She told Kathy that she can have any man that she wants and has a ton of money. She also boasted of her numerous awards and said that Kathy could have been famous and successful had she not been married. I heard Kathy and then asked, what is the parameter of success? How do you define success? Is getting pumped in front of multiple people success? Being able to have any man drill you as success, or being married to a loyal man success? As far as money is concerned, we have enough for us to live our lives happily and give our kids a better future. Yes, you could have been famous and could have been a big makeup artist, but today you are my wife. Candy is alone and will remain alone for rest of her life. Kathy heard all that I said and later fell asleep in my arms. For the next few days, Kathy continued to be gloomy, and I had started to go to my office again. I started to put more hours at work during the weekdays to ensure that I can give more to my wife, both in terms of gifts and my time on weekends. Kathy continued with her Instagram gig, and things looked fine. A few days later, Kathy told me that she has to go to Miami, Florida, as she has to attend a shoot for Candy. I was surprised. I asked, is that the same woman you had a fight with? She said yes and told me that Candy apologized and we have reconciled. I asked, what is this shoot for? She told me that Candy has joined OnlyFans and wants me to make her look good. I was not very pleased and told her that I don't think this is a great idea. She told me that they are paying good money. I told her you don't need money as we have plenty. She said that this is a big gig and she can make a name for herself. I asked if I can come with her. Her reaction was a bit concerning. She said that, what will you do there? Watch Candy take her clothes off. That triggered me off, and I said I have seen her already. Remember, I was the cameraman, and I don't want to see any of her again. I stormed off the room. Although I was not very happy, I let her go to Miami. Kathy went to Miami, and 2 weeks later she came back all tanned and tired. I picked her from the airport, and throughout the way she did not speak a lot, and just closed her eyes and laid back. I could see that she is tired, and once I reached home, I asked her to lay in the bed. I filled the bathtub with lukewarm water and put some salts in it and asked her to lay in the water for some time. Kathy went in the bath, and after about 45 minutes later came out in her bathrobe. Once she took her robe off, I saw something strange. When we get tan only on the parts of the body that is exposed to the sun, and parts that are hidden shine different. I could see no such tan lines on Kathy's body. So, the sun was shining all over her. I asked her about the same, and she said that her tan lines are a result of her being in a chlorine-filled pool and not being under the sun. Water enters your clothes, you see. I argued that her reason is stupid and makes no sense. She then screamed that she is tired and just wants to rest. I was fuming and left the room. For the first time that day since being married, I did not sleep on my bed. I did not talk to her that night and went out for a local bar, and later came home drunk and slept on the couch. I went to the office early in the morning and decided that I'll go home late. Kathy called me twice, but I did not answer. I went home later and saw Kathy waiting for me over the dinner table. I told her that I am not hungry and went to change my clothes. I slept in the guest room again, and Kathy came to me twice during the night, but I shouted back twice at her. Next morning, I decided to tone down and did speak to Kathy. I told her that I am not going to believe her excuses and want her to come clean. She explained that she was at an all-women resort and everyone was without clothes. So, she just joined in. She said that she lied as she knew I would be angry. I did not say a lot, but I told her that I am not happy with what she has done. No decent person would be walking around a resort naked. So what she has done is something I do not appreciate, the fact that the naked person here happens to be my wife. Our argument had toned down and planned to take my wife out for dinner that evening. Fate had other plans. I reached office and started my work. At lunch break, one of the new guys was with his buddies and they were discussing about social media, and I happened to overhear the name Candy. I moved closer and casually joined them in the discussion. One of them then showed his phone, which had a picture of Candy. He had an OnlyFans account and had paid to see Candy. He then moved some more pictures, and in one of the pictures there were two naked women. One of them was Kathy. I was shocked and embarrassed. I quickly left the office and quickly drove off. I kept driving till I did not know where I was. I picked my phone and installed OnlyFans app and started searching for Candy. I found her and then proceeded to pay for her exclusive pictures. There I found Kathy, and in the comments, I found her account. So, I paid for her exclusive pictures and found her pictures at the same location as Candy. So, she was not just making others look good, she was shining herself in front of the camera. I also found a picture where she had advertised other services as well, which included SMS and calls, and even video calls. I was disgusted and beyond my realm of senses. I did not go home that day and decided to walk into a motel. I stayed there that night and called my office that I will not be available for the next whole week. Since I was a good employee, I was given my leave. I went to a friend of mine, who happens to be a lawyer. I explained to him what has happened, and he said that he can get me a divorce. However, I might end up losing a lot of money in settlements. I explained that I have worked hard to build a nice world for me and my wife. That world has been destroyed. I told him that my trust has been shattered and I am not willing to live with Kathy anymore and would be fine to pay whatever is needed to get her out of my life. Before I left his office, my lawyer asked me to hire a private investigator, just for good measure. He also suggested me to go back to my house and pretend normal, just to so Kathy throws caution to the wind. I went back to my home and was greeted by Kathy. I smiled and told her to get ready and took her out for dinner. She seemed happy and we went out for dinner. I told her that would be leaving for a work-related trip to Chicago and will be out for 3 days. I left my house the next morning and went to the local motel. The private investigator had already been hired and he had started working. I waited for the PI to do his job. 2 days later, the PI met me at the motel. He came with a big smile. He then proceeded to open his laptop and started explaining. He told me that Kathy has frequently been spotted with Candy and her manager. He explained that Kathy was working as a makeup artist with Candy and later joined her in her OnlyFans shoot in Miami. I told the PI that I know all of that. What is new? He then informed that Candy's manager is drilling both Kathy and Candy. He then brought up 2 video clips from last 2 days where Kathy was on top of Candy's manager and they were in a car with Candy driving the car. He said that he has more evidences and all of them tell that Kathy is cheating on me. So, I collected everything from the PI and went straight to my lawyer. I asked my lawyer to have the divorce proceedings started ASAP. I went home. Kathy was not at home. I took this opportunity to call my in-laws and asked them to come for dinner as I have an announcement to make. I asked them to keep this as a surprise for Kathy, and they agreed. My mother-in-law went a step further to ask me about the gender of my baby. If only I could tell her what I was going to do tonight. My in-laws arrived by 7 p.m. and took them to drawing room and placed all the evidence in front of them. My father-in-law was furious and started to shake with anger. I had to calm him down and he started crying and apologizing. My mother-in-law was not able to believe all this and said this is all fake. I explained that as we speak your daughter is still with that corn star in her manger. I called the PI and asked to share a live feed. Kathy's mother was shocked to see that her daughter getting intimate and Candy was standing with a camera recording that. She hugged me and told me that she did not raise her daughter like that. I told them both that I tried to provide Kathy with everything and tried my best to be a good husband. He both hugged me and said they wished they had me as a son. Kathy arrived around 10:30 p.m. and was shocked to see her parents and me sitting in the drawing room. She was wearing a pink dress and it was very revealing. Kathy's mother was disgusted and screamed some choice words at her daughter. Her parents then left saying they just wanted to see her for the last time and never to even look towards them, let alone try to contact them. Kathy looked to me and said, "What did you do? What did you tell them? You destroyed my family." I gave her the envelope and told her to leave my house. I told her that she has 2 hours to pack her stuff and get out. She started crying and said, "Where will she go at night?" I told her you have earned money and can afford to live somewhere. She started screaming at me saying if I am spying on her. I showed her OnlyFans page on my phone. She was taken aback but then shot back saying I have done no wrong. I just posed for a picture. I have a good body and I am proud to display it. She threatened me that she will see me in court and she will rip me apart and she will make sure that I lie in a desert drying out. I was recording all of that on a camera set up in the room. I told her she has 1 hour and 45 minutes left before I call the cops. I was angry, and today I had seen a new side of Kathy. She stormed to her room and packed 2 big bags and left the house. I saw that manager guy drive up and picked her up. Got a call from Kathy's father, and he asked not to put the videos as part of the evidence and asked if the divorce can be done without that. I had told them I can try, but did not promise. I met Kathy a few days later at the court. She was accompanied by Candy and her manager. Kathy was dressed like a corn star. I had asked the lawyer not to put the videos in the files and try to see if we can go without them. He agreed. In the court, Kathy denied all allegations of infidelity and blamed me for domestic abuse. She explained that I did not take care of her and did not perform my duty as a husband. I was furious. Luckily, all my spending were done by credit card. I quickly downloaded my bills and sent them to my lawyer. Also signaled my lawyer to take the gloves off. It was now my turn. My lawyer destroyed all the charges. Domestic abuse charges never stood a chance, and there was no evidence of Kathy ever calling for help. The video where Kathy was threatening me was played, proving her intention. My credit card bills proved that I was ensuring that Kathy had everything she wanted. Now it was time to bring in the videos. The lawyer first started with the OnlyFans images, then shared the video that proved that Kathy was indeed cheating. The court finalized the divorce, and I did not have to pay her anything. My lawyer proved that her OnlyFans income was going to be 5 times more than my monthly salary, and in turn, she should be paying alimony to me. I let go of the alimony and asked to be just divorced. I know that OnlyFans income is temporary and will dry up as soon as she gets a bit old. I got my freedom and went back to my home. I was in my home and was wondering, why did Kathy cheat on me? Why did she choose people out of her marriage? Where did I go wrong? I wanted to know, but then I thought it will bring in more pain. I plan to be single for some time, and maybe once I am healed mentally, I would try and date again. It has been more than 2 years, and now I am married again, and I have a kid as well. My daughter is amazing and is joy to be with. My wife works in the same bank as mine. Life is good, and I try my best to keep it that way. I never met or heard from Kathy again, but I hope she is fine. I don't hold anything against her anymore. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.